www.townofbarnstable.us/cablecast public site. Real-time access to the planning board meeting is available utilizing the Zoom link or telephone number and meeting ID provided below. Public comment can be addressed to the planning board by utilizing this Zoom link and the meeting ID provided below. The link is townofbarnstable-us.zoom.us/J/857-610-40272. The phone number is 888-475-4499. And tonight's meeting ID is 857-6104-0272. Applicants, their representatives, and individuals required or entitled to appear before the planning board may appear remotely and may participate through the link or telephone number provided above. Documentary exhibits and/or visual presentations should be submitted in advance of the meeting so that they may be displayed for remote public access viewing. Application materials may be accessed by contacting Karen Herrand at karen.herrand@town.barnstable.ma.us or calling 508-862-4064. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order and introduce our board members and staff, starting with Bob.
Good evening, Bob Twist.
Thank you, Bob. And Tim.
Good evening, Tim O'Neill.
Thank you, Tim. And Steve.
Good evening, everyone. Stephen Costello.
Thank you, Steve. And Mary.
Good evening. This is Mary Barry.
And Michael.
Good evening. This is Michael Messinas.
And Ray.
Happy holidays to all. This is Ray Sexton.
Thank you, Ray. A full board. And I'd also like to, and again, my name is Steve Robichaud. I'd like to introduce town staff, starting with Karen.
Good evening, Karen Herron, Admin Assistant, Planning and Development.
Thank you, Karen. And Kate.
Good evening, Kate Maldonato, Assistant Director of Planning and Development.
Thank you, Kate. And Jim.
Good evening, Jim Kupfer, Senior Planner, Planning and Development.
Thank you, Jim. Notice of recording. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on Channel 18 in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20. I will now inquire whether anyone else is taping this meeting, and if so, please make your presence known. Seeing none, we will continue to the public comment phase of the meeting. This is for any comments not related to this evening's agenda. Sarah, do we have anybody here for general public comment?
I believe everyone is here for a specific item, but I will just ask if anybody is here for general public comment to speak up now, please.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And seeing none, we will continue to our first item on this evening's agenda, which is an A&R. And Bob, if you could handle this item.
Sure, thanks. Kim B. Vermette, MWV Associates LLC, have submitted a plan entitled Plan of Land at 313 Ayano Road and 195 Ridgewood Ave, Hyannis, Mass, prepared for MWV Associates LLC, dated November 18th, 2021, revised December 5th, 2022, for an approval not required plan. This is not a public hearing and does not need to be voted to open or close.
Thank you very much, Bob. And do we have the applicant here this evening to present? Mr. Ojala, welcome, and please take it away.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Dan Ojala from Downkeep Engineering, for the record. Pretty straightforward matter. These are the approval not required under the subdivision control law plans. It would be a little bit less or even simpler, but this one had to go to the zoning board. It's two long-standing parcels assessed separately, but the ownership history was a bit muddy, and the exact line between them was never very clear, and it wasn't utilized properly. So to straighten out the bit of a mud puddle, we brought it into the zoning board, and Mike Schultz brought it through that board, and we have zoning relief to allow the division. There is adequate frontage, which is generally all you look at, but of course we always kind of then look at zoning, and this did need some relief. This is a parcel that, well, you may remember that Ridgewood Avenue, a little friendly 40B development was just to the south of it. That was cut off and some relief was granted for some lot coverage and so forth. And then this further relief just allowed that division into lots that are a little bit below the 40,000 that's required, or somewhat below. One's about 26,000, the other's a few hundred square feet bigger. But plenty of frontage, and they work well together. There's a common easement that's drafted between them so that the drive-through for the 313 Hyanno Road donut shop will continue to work, and that the people that park at 195 Ridgewood can back up easily. So it's two properties that kind of work well together, and we're doing some cross easements, access easements. One of them is being conveyed out, but they'll continue to enjoy the common entrances, which are generally, looked upon by zoning to be complementary and less curb cuts. So it seems to work well. The zoning board did find that it was approvable. I'm sure staff did a report. I didn't have a chance to look, but pretty straightforward. Once the zoning board has acted, you guys can properly endorse, and it is approval not required. So you don't make any determinations, but the zoning, but the zoning board has granted the relief that's needed to make this division happen. It's about it. Pretty simple, just kind of clarifying where the line is on the ground. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Odell. I appreciate that report. We also had a great staff report from town staff that's included in the materials with a good outline of the proposal. And Jim, is there anything that you'd like to mention about the proposal or from that staff report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so as Dan Ojala represented, I did go through zoning board for relief from zoning. It does have adequate frontage on a way, and it has adequate access from a public way, multiple public ways. So I would recommend endorsement of the plan.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. And just going around to the board for any questions, comments, concerns, starting with Bob.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Thank you, Bob. And Mary.
All set. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And Steve.
No questions, Steve. Thank you.
All right. And Tim.
I'm all set. Thank you.
All right. And Ray.
No questions here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Michael.
No question. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I'm also all set. So at this time, we would look for a motion on this item.
I'd be happy to make that motion, Mr. Chair. I move to endorse the plan entitled Plan of Land at 313 Hyanno Road and 195 Ridgewood Avenue, Hyannis, Mass., prepared for MWV Associates, LLC by Down Cape Engineering, last revised on December 5th, 2022 as an approval not required plan.
Thank you, Bob. And do we have a second?
This is Mary. I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mary. And all those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. The matter passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Ojala.
Thank you, and I appreciate staff getting that right in before the end of the year. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Moving right along to our next item on tonight's agenda, which is a regulatory agreement. And Steve, if you don't mind.
Sure. This is a regulatory agreement. Shoestring Properties LLC seeks to enter into a regulatory agreement with the town of Barnstable to construct 34 condominium units in 2 buildings with associated improvements at 110 School Street and 115 School Street, Hyannis. The redevelopment consists of 22 3-bedroom units and 12 2-bedroom units. A total of 70 parking spaces will be provided. Majority of members present must vote, continued from August 8th, 2022, in order to form a subcommittee, and continued from September 26th, 2022, October 3rd, 2022, and October 24th, 2022. And the hearing, as we know, is still open. However, new waivers have been requested and noticed.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. And speaking of the new waiver that has been requested and noticed, I'd like to seek a motion to incorporate this new waiver that has been applied and noticed to abutters and all interested parties for consideration.
So moved, Steve.
Thank you. And is there a second?
This is Mary. I'll second that.
Thank you, Mary. And all those in favor, Bob,
Aye.
Mary,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye. And
Tim,
Aye.
Ray,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
and myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye.
And Steve, I guess may have been appropriate to read the motion as requested for the additional waivers that were part of the new included and noticed.
Yeah, you know what? I agree, Steve. Why don't we redo that just to cover all our bases? Have you actually read that one out?
Okay. So again, the new waivers are being requested into the existing hearing that is currently open for the Dockside Regulatory Agreement proposed for 110 School Street and 115 School Street, Hyannis. The new waiver includes Chapter 112, Article 3, Hyannis Main Street Waterfront District, requirements for a certificate of appropriateness from the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Commission for all revisions that have occurred to the project as a result of the regulatory agreement process that differs from the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Certificate of Appropriateness for this project approved on February 16th, 2022.
Great. Thank you, Steve. And do we have a second on this motion?
This is Mary. I'll second that.
All right. Thank you, Mary. And all those in favor, Bob,
Aye.
Mary,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Ray,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
and myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Okay, so we have that included. And, you know, at this time, we're going to shift to the applicant for an update. You know, we have a lot to discuss and a lot to review. There's been some changes to the regulatory agreement proposal. And, you know, plenty to work through. I personally don't see us voting on this evening because there's a lot to work through. We want to hear from the public again, and we want to hear from the board. So I think we'll continue our discussion on this, you know, this proposal with significant impact. Mr. Kenny, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know you have some updates to share with us, so please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the Planning Board. For the record, Attorney John Kenny with the Law Office in Centerville. And I come before you this evening again representing Shoestring Properties, LLC, the applicant for the regulatory agreement. With me this evening is Stuart Bornstein, the manager. Excuse me, Dan Ojala, the engineer, our engineer from Down Cape, Dale Janap from Janap Architects, and Pat Nickerson, an attorney from my office. Since our last meeting, we've had a crane test where various members of the planning board were able to come to the site and visualize the height of the buildings with a crane that was raised up and see how the buildings would fit with the surrounding neighborhood. After that crane test and after the last meeting, there's been some tweaks to the building design, some tweaks to the site plan which reflect some of the comments that were received. And then edits to the regulatory agreement. And probably the two biggest changes are the new requested waiver regarding the Main Street Hyannis Historic Waterfront District Committee. And then the other thing is, after listening to the board comments at the last meeting, my client is now offering 5 3-bedroom affordable units off-site. So that's a total of 15 bedrooms. So let's talk about 9 bedrooms, 12 bedrooms, whether there'd be 1, 2, or 3 units, 3-bedroom units. He's offering 5 3-bedroom affordable units offsite at 310 Barnstable Road. At this point, I'm going to ask, I don't know if it's Dale is the only one from Janap or if Mike Nee is here, but if somebody from the architectural firm could just kind of walk us through the changes to the building design since the last meeting, I would appreciate it. And then we'll go to Dan Ogeler after that.
I'm here, John. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can. I
Okay,
didn't
great.
see you earlier, Mike.
All right, great. Again, I'm
Just
Mike.
real quick, I'm sorry, just obviously state your name for the record. And Jim, I don't know if, as we work through this, you would be able to share some of it, either the plans or the renderings, just so folks can follow along.
Yeah, I can certainly pull them up. I don't know, Mike, if you have an opportunity to. Sarah, maybe it's a question for Sarah. If how would you
I
like?
wasn't told that anyone else would need to screen share tonight. So Jim, if you don't mind sharing it, I'd appreciate that.
Sure, I can pull it up. Not a problem. Mike, you just have to direct me which documents you would like to see.
Probably just the site plan, just to start.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to...
Anything that shows the ground floor plan would be fine. I think most of you are fairly familiar with the project overall, and the modifications that we made are primarily on the site. And I think Dan Ogeler will speak to those, but they're primarily in response to concerns expressed by people about the amount of access we're providing on that road and the potential for some of that access to be blocked during certain times of drop-offs or deliveries or trash pickups and such things. So we tried to make some changes to the site that would alleviate those issues by we removed a rather monumental handicap ramp that was along the west parcel edge. And along that drop-off zone there, we're kind of where your cursor is highlighting. We removed that rather long ramp for handicap access and replaced that with a much smaller footprint of a handicap lift or elevator. And that allowed us to push that sidewalk in a little tighter to the building and allow for a drop-off area. We had to, architecturally, we had to shift a couple of the access points down to our basement garage, which really doesn't impact very much visually. We just stacked it under the front stair, which was already in place along South Street on the west parcel. We moved one of the trash enclosures that was on that corner and moved that out and screened that with landscaping out along that edge of the building. And that allowed us to push that drop-off zone further over. On the other parcel, the east parcel, thank you, there was some slight changes to the ramp over there just to help us work with the generator location over there and allow for better access up to the pool area. But that's primarily what you see from the exterior. There's kind of some minor tweaks to the basement area, which I don't really need to get into. The basement parking area and just the access into that. And I think probably if John wants to take it back or Dan wants to kind of explain the site, I think that would probably be appropriate.
I would ask Dan Ogeler, can you address the various site plan changes that you've made?
Sure. For the record, Dan Ogeler. I'm a land surveyor and civil engineer with Downkeep Engineering in Yarmouthport and helping Mr. Bornstein out with this dockside condominium. So Mike did a pretty good job of going over the changes, but I think the principal one that you really notice is that really large loading zone that's now on the west property that can serve to have the rubbish truck pull in and pull right off the road, leaving a full, 22-foot plus width of pavement back and forth while they're loading, unloading. And so any furniture trucks or things like that can now really get off the road much better than before. And that was accomplished by moving that long handicap ramp, investing in a little elevator there to tuck into the corner, and also moving the rubbish shed around the corner, the west rubbish shed around the corner to the front of South Street. There, the grade drops off a little, so it'll be tucked down a little bit, and some site stairs run up beside it. We leveled off the west side, raising it about a foot, just to make sure that the grades worked all the way around, nice and level, not too far below the first floor. The other changes were, you had heard with the PDF diagram that was delivered a few meetings back, some details on the crosswalks. So we incorporated in, you can see the intersection broadened out the direction of those curb cuts, show the detectable warning strips, show the pedestrian pedestals and monuments, the flashing beacons and the lights that you pressed across the roads there. So Mr. Bornstein is committed to doing that just per their recommendations. And we've re-radiused the curbing a bit. We clarified that we're doing all the overlay all along South Street, the full length of the project, up past the crosswalk. You can see the limit of work just tucking off on the right-hand side of the sheet there. So all between that, we're pulling up the granite, redoing it, leveling all ADA compliant sidewalks. The east side continues to about the U in South Street there, where it picks up a perfectly good concrete and granite sidewalk. So no sense in wasting resources. We stopped the work there, but across the street on both sides and on the other side of the street now from 115 is shown the full 5-foot wide concrete plus a 6-inch curb for about a 6.5 foot, 5.5 on the north side. And on the south, we do show the requested 8-foot wide concrete sidewalk plus a 6-inch curb. It will give you about an 8.5 foot clear path that'll tie in nicely for a multi-path if it ever does come down this way. And that's on both sides of the street. That we were able to compress the landscaping, added some additional trees out in the front. And again, I just remind the board, this is intended to be a nice high-end waterfront condominium. So Mr. Bornstein is not going to spare any expense to really dial up the front of this and make it look very appealing from the street, because he's got to sell these for good money, and people expect a nice look. And so he has assured us and me and you that that will be very nicely landscaped, sprinklered, and well-maintained along there. So that was about it. You can see anywhere that's marked 1 on that plan with a little triangle are some of the changes. Again, mostly the loading zone was deepened on the east side, really significantly deepened on the west side. And then other than that, it was mostly just cleaning up details on the site grades. The drainage had to move around a bit because of the relocated rubbish sheds and the ramps. But that work was all done kind of behind the scenes and on other sheets. That would be and of course we lowered the roof height, so the zoning table changed in many places as well. It was updated values on the building height, and both you measure the building code measures the same as the zoning code that's pending. You measure from finished grade surface. The existing grade is measured from the natural grade plane, which is a little bit lower. So both sets of values are on the plans for your reference. And assuming that the other zoning doesn't go through before we get a permit, would seek the relief on the higher value. So it'd be 66 foot measured from the existing natural grade plane. That's the current rule on the west building, and doesn't make much difference on the east. 62.1 on the east parcel is actually a little bit less than the 62.3 that would be measured from the finished grade plane. And that's because we're cutting down the high side a little bit and filling the low side a little bit. And it's basically a wash on the grade planes on the east parcel. So I think that's about it. I don't think there's anything significant that changed, or there certainly wasn't within the conservation jurisdiction. So I think we're okay there. Most of the site details are the same, but again, that roof was compressed down, so the height's a little bit less. I did, after the height test, I took photographs from the various angles that we'd done the renderings for before, and I'm pleased to report that Mike Nee did a great job with those renderings. It was extremely accurate. The height of that bucket was right on the ridge line where we said it was, and so that all checked out nicely. I was pleased to see that. And I think my gut is that it really doesn't look too bad. Once you step back a little bit and look at it, it's gonna It's going to blend in nicely with the other features there. You've got, large boats, you've got huge antennas on the boats, you've got, decent sized buildings around it. And I think it'll be a nice addition to the harbor area, but of course, that's my personal opinion. Be glad to answer any questions if you have them.
Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Odula. And Mr. Kenny, do you want to continue?
Yes, thank you. I don't know if you can hear me because my screen's gone black. At one point I was frozen. I'm not quite sure what's going on.
We can hear you okay.
Perfect. I'll just briefly walk through the changes. I've submitted a red line and a clean copy of the regulatory agreement. And I'll just quickly go through and touch upon the changes. First change was under the whereas clauses, simply noting that the first meeting on this project before your board took place on August 8th, 2022. And then under section 1B, proposed redevelopment, we've just made note that what was proposed to be a 5-foot sidewalk along South Street along the frontage of both parcels is now going to be an 8-foot wide shared use path to be constructed. So that's noted on both under the proposed development on both the east and the west parcels. And we added a reference to the Town of Barnstable Department of Public Works plan for the intersection of School Street and South Street that Dan Ojala just walked you through. And so we've included that in, and we're committed to redoing that intersection as Dan just described. Under section 2, which lists all the plans, these are just updates reflecting the latest revisions to the plans. And then we switch over finally under section 2, the last one is W. It's again just a reference to the Town of Barnstable Public Works plan entitled Markups to Applicant's Plan, just including that in the plan so that there's a record of what it is that we're being asked to do and committed to. Under section 3, we made it a clarification. There will be one lease allowed per year for not less than 1 month, no more than one lease. And then we move on. Under section 21 is the first reference to where the developer will provide 5 offsite rental units, 65% medium income qualification, consisting of 5 3-bedroom units, which will be restricted in perpetuity. And then under section 22, the construction of the condominium complex will result in the following benefits to the town. We've added into there the reference to the intersection at South Street and School Street to be built in accordance with the DPW plan, and reference to the sidewalks again. Getting to the requested zoning waivers, they're all listed there. I'm happy to go through them, but I think you've all had a chance to look at them. And they're all within a foot or less. For example, the minimum front yard setback of 20 feet is waived to allow a front yard setback for the west building of 15.8 feet. It had been 14.8 feet. I think that's the largest. The next one is 19.0 versus 19.2. The most significant one is the height, and Dan just touched upon those. The maximum building height of 35 feet is waived to allow a maximum building height of 66 feet for the west building and 62 feet for the east building. Lot coverage, it's gone from 75.7 to 76.7 and 71.2 to 76. And then under the waivers from the general ordinance, that's what we added under section B, the request for relief from any further requirements of a certificate of appropriateness from the Historic District Committee for the changes since it was first approved by them back in February of 2022. And then there's again a reference to the 5 offsite rental units in reference to floor plans for those units. They are preliminary, but there will be 5 3-bedroom affordable units being proposed. Under paragraph 28, no building permit shall issue unless and until the developer submits credible evidence to the town council that has submitted a local initiative program application and the fees, if any, of the Department of Housing and Community Development for the creation of the off-site affordable housing units at 310 Barnstable Road, Hyannis. There was concern about the fact that these were being off-site and what should be a trigger point for the issuance of building permit for the dockside condominium project in conjunction with the proposal to build the units at 310 Barnstable Road. So it is now, we can't get a building permit until the LIP program has been submitted to the satisfaction of the town attorney's office. Under paragraph 29, no certificate of occupancy will be issued until all conditions of this agreement have been met in the design and infrastructure plan approval has been issued, or until the developer either submits a bond or a certified check payable to the town of Barnstable in an amount to be agreed upon. And then finally, upon receiving a certificate of occupancy, the developer, its successors and assigns, which would be the condo association, shall employ at least one individual who will serve as a full-time on-site property manager, including in those duties will be to make sure that School Street is kept available for use by emergency vehicles and first responders, making sure it remains unobstructed. And that's pretty much a summary of all the changes that we've made since our last meeting. We'll be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Appreciate that update. We've also received multiple items of correspondence, including correspondence directly related to our most recent waiver. These have been distributed to the board, and I know the board takes these very seriously, and we take all correspondence into consideration, and we very much appreciate that correspondence. From here, I'd like to actually bring Jim in to speak about a couple things. We have another excellent detailed staff report that's available, as well as a height chart that gets into some specifics about zoning and heights of related buildings around town. After Jim makes his comments, we're going to go to the public for public comment. I want everyone to have a chance to speak, and then we'll move to listen to the board and any questions, comments the board may have. So Jim, if you don't mind, would love to hear about comments you have related to the two documents that staff has provided.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I get to that, I did want to make one note that I appreciate Attorney Kenny's very detailed review of the regulatory agreement and the red line. I will note to the board that the town attorney's office is still vetting that and has not provided a final revised copy back to the board just yet. So I apologize for the delay there. And I appreciate the red line version from Mr. Kenny. In addition, as the chairman mentioned, you do have two reports from staff on in your packet and for the public online under the planning board's meeting materials. The first being the general staff report that just provides an update on the background, indicating that since the last time the board has met, an additional substantial waiver has been submitted. And so that was properly re-noticed so that we can give all interested parties in the general public an opportunity to recognize that waiver request and for the board to have time to consider that. So now that tonight has been accepted into the process and is to be considered by the board. A couple of notes in the staff report. The staff report does not consider yet in its narrative the additional negotiated public benefits that are provided or offered by the applicant, those being the reduction in height and the additional affordable units. Those certainly will be considered moving forward if the board recognizes those and wishes to continue to negotiate on that process. And then secondarily, on the other staff report, the height chart, this originated from a number of questions from the board from the last meeting, as well as when I, as a staff representative, met individually with board members out on site. for the height demonstration. There were many questions involving what is this structure, what is that structure, and what are those heights and what is allowed. So we thought we'd just put it in memo form for the board's consideration. Really just going down quickly, it allows, or it outlines the current Barnstable zoning ordinance and the required maximum heights, or the allowed maximum heights, I should say, for both the Harbor District, the Medical Services District, which both are within the neighborhood that this project is cited. I also have shown the proposed amendment to the downtown zoning ordinance. Obviously, that is proposed and not codified. That is before town council for consideration. But I did want for the board's understanding, as this board unanimously recommended that zoning ordinance to move forward. Thirdly, I placed in the 89 Lewis Bay, better known as the Greenery Regulatory Agreement. That is also online for anyone's consumption, just because that was something that was highlighted by, again, many board members as I was out there with them looking at the demonstration, trying to understand how that was permitted. And sure enough, of course, as many of you know, and probably many of you in the public were participated in, was a regulatory agreement as well of an existing structure. And then I put in a few other things that have recently been, well, this one that's being reviewed now, Dockside, obviously the hospital that was recently approved, and Sea Captain's Row regulatory agreement, just so you as the board understand the different height dynamics and the neighborhood as a whole as you're looking at the big picture there. I'm happy to answer any questions from the board if you have any.
Well, first of all, Jim, thank you so much to you and the team for putting this together. This was very, very helpful for me to understand the current situation and what obviously is before town council. One thing I was curious, are you able to share with the board and put into the public record the Greenery Regulatory Agreement, just so that we can compare the two of them?
Absolutely, yes. The Greenery Regulatory Agreement is uploaded on the website. I can pull it up right now if you like, and we can certainly include it in the record. Just really quickly here, I can share my screen. I know there's probably a few that in the public that participated in this regulatory agreement, as it's not that old. It was, I believe, 2007, if I recall right, and it does discuss things such as demolition of structures. There's 2 residential structures, the reuse of the existing structure, and it also discusses, height waivers and other waivers that I thought, was good for the board to understand. Again, each and every regulatory agreement obviously it has its own variables at play. So I'm not trying to say it's apples to apples by any means, but certainly as it stands there today for your understanding and consideration.
I appreciate that. Definitely stands as a great comparison to consider. And just one quick question. I know it states that the highest roof plane should not exceed 48.5 feet, and that the stairwells elevator shall not exceed 61 feet. Is that the height? The maximum height, the peak height of that building, 61 feet, is that what it ended up being? Do you happen to know?
I cannot confirm that. I don't have the as-built, but I would assume that is work, or as it's written, it was written for the approved plans, which allows for that 61 feet being the stairwell elevator, which is what's there today. But again, I don't have the as-built plan to 100% certify that.
No worries. I appreciate that. Before we move on from this, because again, I thought this was really helpful, I just wanted to do a quick circle here of the board to see if board has questions about this particular document. Bob, is there anything on this you wanted to pose to Jim? You're muted.
You're asking if I have any questions to Jim on the memo he just referred to?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm good on that. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Mary, anything on this?
Just that, what is the timing for the proposed amendment for downtown zoning ordinance, maximum height per zoning? Do we have a,
Yeah, so my understanding is the town council, and I do see at least one council member on, or multiple council members on, so they could speak if I'm incorrect, but I believe it's being considered on January 5th of 2023.
okay. And then with regards to that, the proposed shoestring property is considered Barnstable Harbor District, correct? Just for clarification.
That's correct. Yes, in the current and the proposed is both in the, it stays the same as the Harbor District.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. I'm all set, Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Mary. And Steve, anything on this?
Just Jim, quickly refresh my memory of about what the new proposed zoning coming forward. What is the height that we had included for that 4 stories?
Yeah. So, in referencing in the Harbor District,
Or I guess in that as well as maybe in the greater zoning changes that we were recommending.
sure. So in the proposed zoning, the Harbor District stays the same. As I think we discussed when it was before the board. I think the discussion was more of a holistic look at the harbor before making any wholesale zoning changes. The Downtown Village District rezoning proposal, which would replace a portion of the medical services and would be what is across the street from South Street, essentially, discusses both minimum and maximum heights. Minimums being first floor if commercial, and residential having different values. I believe 10 for residential, 12 for retail. Sorry, I don't have the minimum stated on here. Maximums, however, contemplates or can make sure that if a development comes forward, that they are not using the zoning to their benefit to leverage it in a great manner. So essentially, for a single story, the maximum height allowed is 18 feet. And the reason for that is if you go above 18 feet, you're then considered 2 stories in the proposed new zoning, so that you can't continue to go higher and higher per story. The realities of it being 18 feet might be minimal, but nevertheless, that is the maximum possibly considered on the first floor. And then beyond that, because in the downtown village, you're allowed to go up to 3.5 or a maximum of 4 stories if that 4th story is set back to allow for that human presence, that human scale to maintain. Each of those is 16 feet is, again, the maximum. So if you exceed 16 feet at each of those stories, that would then count as 2. So if you're at 16.5 feet, you're now at 2 stories as opposed to the 1. So doing the math of 18, 16, 16, and 16 with that 4th story setback, we're talking about, I believe, 66 feet in height as a maximum on that side of South Street and through beyond Main Street there. So we're talking about that neighborhood. And again, that's the maximum possible. The realities of that being constructed, I would question, given the practicality of constructing residential and its standard formulas. We're talking more along the lines of 10 to 12 feet in height per story. But nevertheless, I wanted to give you what it states per the regulation that's proposed, and that is no greater than 66 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was really helpful, Jim. I appreciate that. Tim, anything you wanted to pose to Jim about this?
No, I think that was a good coverage of the proposed zoning that's currently working its way through town council. I think the one thing, if it would be possible, I don't know if it's just too far back, just to have, if we're looking at the greenery regulatory agreement and that kind of maximum height for informational purposes for this discussion, it would be good to have an as-built of some sort, or if we could dig through the old plans of the building department for what was submitted for that, I think that would be a good comparison just to see how that stacks up for what was in the regulatory agreement.
Yeah, that sounds great. I agree, Tim. Thank you. And Ray, anything on this height document here?
One thing for Jim, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So getting out your calculator, Jim, what would be the max height allowed in the new proposed downtown zoning area if you actually did do the more industry standard of, say, let's say 12 feet per story?
Right. So yeah, your standard 4-story building for something like this would be around the 48 feet in height maximum. Your 10 to 12, as you mentioned, 12 stories, 12 times 4, pretty simple. With the 4th story in this proposal set back, obviously 8 feet, so it's not prominent on the street.
Thanks, Jim. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, just to clarify, Jim, I mean, if you're using that 12 foot, I mean, technically, couldn't the first story be retail at 18? So then 12 times 3 plus 18 could be at 54 feet if you went with retail for the first floor.
Yep, you're right, Mr. Chairman. And so that's with the proposed zoning, it certainly provides for additional opportunities, based on the area in which it's cited. Yes, that's how it's structured. And again, we've had a couple of conceptuals come in already looking at trying to develop on Main Street, utilizing the proposed zoning, hoping to get the proposed zoning passed, and they're using the industry standards.
Yeah. No, that's great. I know that proposed zoning is definitely geared towards mixed use. Certainly a great area for it. And I'm hopeful that goes through. I know there's a lot of developers looking forward to it. So
Steve, I just have a clarifying question for Jim. Jim, that's all not Harbor District, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Thank you, Mary. Yes, that is again the downtown village. So that's that's South Street heading north.
Correct. Okay.
Yes. The Harbor District, as I mentioned in the beginning, stays the same. The Harbor District is 35 feet in height max, 2.5 stories max.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the clarification. Sorry, Steve.
Yeah. No, thank you for that, Mary. I mean, just for comparison's sake, just looking at what's across the street, or proposed for across the street. Michael, anything on the height chart you wanted to ask about?
No, I am good. Thank you. Thanks, Mr.
Okay, great. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ray, go ahead.
Some guidance. I actually had questions for Mr. Ojala and Mr. Kenny based on their presentations. How would you like to handle that?
Stand by just a few minutes. We are going to go to public now. Why don't we hear from the public, and then we can make our questions and comments after having heard from the public.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so looks like we have some members of the public. Want to give everyone a chance to speak. If we could kind of keep our comments to say 4 to 5 minutes, just giving everyone a chance. And Sarah, if you don't mind kind of guiding us here with public comment.
Sure, not a problem. I kind of tried to keep track of how everyone came in. So we're going to start with Cheryl Powell. Cheryl, you can unmute. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for hearing me tonight. So I did send in a letter, and hopefully you've all had that and had an opportunity to read it. I'm just not going to read the whole thing because you should have already read it. But I did want to pluck out a few things. And I wanted to point out, I haven't commented in the previous with regard to the revisions, because as soon as there were revisions, it became very clear it could come back to the HHDC. And I do not want there to be any predetermination, because we always want to hear everything equally, fairly, and openly. But I wanted to point out that I do feel that these are significantly revised renderings that are momentously obvious, that trigger various sections of our ordinance, sorry. But I wanted to also note that I'm very pleased that the applicant does seem willing to try to make changes. However, looking at the ordinance, and I'm sticking straight to that because it's part of public record, not opinion other than to stick by our ordinance. It was questioned about whether or not this was in the historic district. Section 112.28, in exercising the powers with regard to the HHDC. For purposes of this article, any structure totally within the district shall be considered wholly within the district. That is clarified. Bouncing down a little bit. No agreement should be made unless there's a certificate of appropriateness, but the certificate of appropriateness that was barely accepted, was pertained to the previous proposal, not to this revised proposal, and not to the current significantly changed renderings. And I want to also point out that this application is getting a lot of attention from the public. And I think it was Bob Twist at one of the previous meetings pointed out that what you do tonight may well set a precedent. So please be careful. I wanted to point out that I do feel that these have changed significantly enough to trigger the various sections of our ordinance. And that the proper procedure, as per my belief, is that this application should now be sent back to the Hyannis Main Street and Waterfront Historic District Commission, HHDC, due to the guidelines set out into Ordinance Chapter 112, Historic Properties. As this is now, I believe, a new application with a totally different look and feel, and not what was previously submitted for a certificate. I would therefore argue that this is not what was approved, and suggest that this be remanded back for a fresh certificate of appropriateness, which will pertain to the new renderings. And I also want to express full respect to the applicant. He does do wonderful things for the town. I want to point out that the vote was also taken at the HHDC meeting based on the fact that we all believe that all the abutters have been notified. And there has been expression that disappointment that I'm not saying, we have great staff, but things happen. It does appear that 2 did not get the notice, and to keep this squeaky clean, I think that they had a right to be heard. Would it have changed the vote? I don't know. It might have done, it might not have done, but I think they had a right to be heard. The bottom line is that our rules, ordinance, guidelines exist for a reason, and we've all sworn to uphold them. It has been argued that the waiver was given on the basis that, well, it passed the HHDC, they were perfectly happy with it. Again, we thought the abutters had been notified. That doesn't mean it would have changed it. But this does seem to be a new application. It has already been indicated. The proper procedure is to send it back. I wanted to go very quickly on to Jim has said that, or actually it was the applicant's representative said that this is a revision that differs from the certificate that was granted on February 16th, 2022, that was stated tonight. Jim has also stated, and I quote, that this is a substantial waiver. The applicants, I think it was one of his representatives, that there are new tweaks that are added to the previous reg agreement. It is therefore my firm belief that due to concerns that have been expressed, and with giving full respect to the fresh efforts of the applicant, and thank you very much, and without expressing any opinion of the new other than gratitude of willing to work with us, that it be sent back to us so that we do not create a precedent that we may not want to hold up to. Also tonight it was mentioned Mugar. It's always compared to Mugar. I want to point out Mugar is not in the historic district, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not in the historic district. And Mary, I think it was you that asked about it, if this was still in the historic district. And as I stated earlier, according to the ordinance, anything partially within the district shall be considered wholly within the district. There were things about the realities of height, but that the reality, it states as per the regulation. Jim has stated what the regulation is. Again, precedent, just with respect to it. I think that pretty much clarifies. I know it bounced around a bit because I didn't want to bore you with reading the whole letter. anyway, I'm glad to hear that the chairman has said you don't want to go for a vote tonight. I think there's a lot to consider, not only from the things that have been expressed to you. I understand that other members of the HHDC have sent in letters as well, at least some of them, that they feel that we made a platform. We listen to all the abutters. We go out of our way to consider everything and everything that the applicant has to say. But this is a new application. I can't comment as to it because if it comes back to us, I want to be able to be, I don't want to have to recuse. I want to be able to be different from it other than to quote what the ordinance is and the rules. I'm happy to take questions, but other than that, I want to thank you for hearing me out and thank you for all the hard work that you do.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciate that. Sarah, next person.
Next that came into the room was Attorney Lawler with Mr. Kirker. I didn't know if you wanted to speak now.
Yeah, and I believe Wayne will want to speak as well. He may want to wait for a little bit after myself. As you know, my name's David Lawler. I'm an attorney in Hyannis, and I represent Hyannis Marina and Mr. Kirker behind me. We have gone through numerous meetings about these issues, and there are a lot of matters. And I get concerned at some of these meetings that, because what happens is, and it's by nature, is that the board can only deal with so many issues at a time, and that, you know, I don't want to see that, you know, like for instance, tonight, there was a lot of discussion about height and some bylaws and some other things, but there's been numerous conversations about parking and about the end of School Street. Jim, if you could pull that plan up, that'd be very helpful. The one you had up before, the site plan. So, but while he's doing that, I want to talk about height a little bit and about the present zoning. You know, we have one of the, you know, premier, at least certainly in my opinion, certainly on Cape Cod and Massachusetts, one of the best planning departments, certainly for a town of this size. And, you know, for them to go forward and propose new zoning regulations, and it's a big deal. And it was, and I know it's been up and then postponed because of quorum issues. And a tremendous amount of thought and energy has gone into the new zoning regulations. And what's interesting is that for this particular zone, the height has remained at 2.5 stories. And there was some talk about across the street. Well, you know, I'm the attorney that did the regulatory agreement for the greenery and Lewis Bay. And the important factor of that is it's a story less. It also, one of the stories is actually, you know, half in the ground. And that's where the commercial space is totally different. But it's also set so far back from the harbor. And I kept on hearing the term, you know, standard, you know, with respect to the street, Well, if I may, without insulting South Street, it's a phenomenal way and everything like that. But the real important part of this is our harbor. We have South Street, we got North Street, we got Main Street, we got hundreds and hundreds of streets, thousands maybe, I don't know. We only have one Hyannis Harbor. And this is the gateway to the community where the ferries come in, where people boating come in, where we try to promote commerce. I know that there's certain studies out there that exist of how much revenue an active working harbor brings into a community. And if we think about this and the massing of this structure, which is at least twice what's allowed by zoning now, and what our planning department has proposed as the future zoning, twice. You know, and one of the things about a regulatory agreement, and I don't want to get philosophical on you, but there's like 30 something waivers being asked for. And, you know, does the board and subsequent town council have the authority to do it? Yes, but that's a different question than should you do it? And that's the question, isn't can you do it? The question is, should you do it? Because if you approve this and it's built, it's going to be around long after everybody in this room is dead and buried, and there's nothing we can do about it. And if we're going to be talking about a building that's double the size of what is presently thought of and zoned, and again, what wasn't mentioned, and I want to continue to keep in mind, it's being built on the highest land point in the area. It's about 30 feet above sea level, and and if you look at the line right there, that's the 100-foot. I mean, it's essentially part of the structure is within the 100-foot of the harbor. So, that's what we're talking about. You have this giant, I don't want to call it a monolithic structure because there's two of them, but you got two of these giant structures that are just going to appear overburdening the harbor. And yeah, granted, it's housing, but this isn't housing that's going to replace any other housing unless it's in Osterville or Hyannisport. And Mr. Bornstein, to his credit, is authorizing affordable housing, which I know is a need in the town. But I'm not sure we can sell Hyannis Harbor for 5 affordable units. The price is too high. And, and one of the other things that was addressed was the School Street congestion. I know that they took the handicap ramp and they put a little lift in and moved some things over again. But in looking at this, if you're looking at, and actually, Jim, if you'd slide it back up again a little bit, just a couple inches, look at the trash on the west side. So what are you going to tell me that they're going to every day drag 40 trash cans across School Street, into the loading zone? And who's to guarantee that that loading zone is not going to be filled up with a FedEx truck or an Amazon truck? We still have 90 bedrooms and 70 parking spaces. That hasn't changed. The congestion on the street and the danger on the street is tremendous. And I want to read, and I don't know if it's part of the record, and if it's not, I would ask that Jim, he was very gracious and sent it to me. But Captain David Webb, after the October meeting, sent an email to planning to Elizabeth Jenkins and Jim Cuppert. And in this email, I'm going to read it. It's very short. And it says, "Hi, Elizabeth and James." Oh, God, my glasses are rotten dirty. And it says, after further review and on-site visit with the abutters to the Dockside Condo project, Chief Burke and I wanted to ensure that what Hyannis Fire mentioned in site plan is maintained not only during construction, but after completion. Public safety needs complete access to School Street docks 24/7. The abutters and us, I emphasize the word us, have concerns with trash pickups, deliveries, etc. Can we ensure that there's adequate signage and condo parking management measures in place in the agreement? Now that is sent by the captain of the Hyannis Fire Department and references the chief who was here. So what happened at that meeting? The chief was here and you asked him some questions and he seemed to be fine with it. Then he went down to the water's edge, and then he looked at it and spoke with the abutters and actually observed the traffic. Now I suggest to you the minor change of moving in and creating one drop-off lane is insufficient. And again, and I'm starting to repeat myself, these units, these high-end being sold as $1 million units, and what is there, 44 of them. As I said before, they don't clean their own units. You're going to have housekeepers, you're going to have FedEx, you're going to have DoorDash, you're going to have Amazon, you're going to have the pool cleaner, you're going to have all kinds of services. There's just not enough parking. And School Street is the School Street that supplies safety to Hyannis Harbor. So not only are you going to be building this edifice or these two edifices on the harbor on the highest peak, you're also creating havoc on this waterway that has that brings down 18-wheelers to the steamship and trucks on a regular basis. And it's not going to be a problem in February and March and January. But it's going to be a huge problem in July and August, and a substantial problem in May, June, September, and October, half the year. This is not, we look at it and we look at Mr. Bornstein's project, and he has these two small lots. Why can't he build, 20 units and not go underground? It's not going to be as expensive. Use one as a parking lot. Build apartments on the other, high end. You can still go up. You can still see the water. There's nothing blocking it. just because he's seeking to maximize this lot to the point where it's going to pop, you couldn't fit a shed on this lot. It's so overbuilt for the area. It's so, 5 stories, all units, no parking, underground. There's so much here. I mean, how much can you eat? I mean, for Christ's sakes, it's one of those things. It's just way too much for this particular lot. And again, just because you can approve it, should you? And I suggest you should not. It's just, it's such a big ask. And again, if you do it, it's going to be here, and we're going to have to deal with it for, or our children and our grandchildren are going to have to deal with it, not us. Well, we will for a little while. But that's the situation, and it's just too much for this particular area. And to end with it, planning is right. They're the ones who put in a 2.5-story building. Sorry, I shouldn't. They're the ones who have said to themselves after what they reviewed and thought that on this side of the harbor, 2.5 is enough. And you know what? They're right. Thank you.
Thank you. Wayne, did you want to make comments?
I would, but I'll wait to see what others have to say first.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Sarah?
Yep.
Next.
Next is Felicia Penn. Felicia, it's your turn to speak.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much. The last correspondence I wrote to the planning board about this project was November 10th. I hope you all had a chance to review that. The proposed project now, I'm going to deal with what I've heard tonight, okay, rather than go backwards, except for some of it's very consistent all the way through. So now instead of being double what's allowed in height, it's 86% higher than what's allowed in zoning, which I heard tonight. It's still 4 times the allowed density that your zoning allows, and it has at least 20 parking spaces. It's at least 20 parking spaces shy of what they should have. So I just wanted to remind you once again. South Street may be 2-way by the time this project's built. There's a possibility of that. Has anybody factored whether or not that changes anything for this project, especially I would think if there was a traffic study done or anything. I haven't heard anything about traffic studies, so I don't know if anything was done, but if I could now come from Yarmouth, I have to buy my bird seed down at Mid-Cape Seed and Grain, and I can take a left from East Main Street onto Lewis Bay Road and take a right on South Street so I can avoid Main Street to get myself home and go up to Ocean Street. I'll just be tooling on by this place. Is that going to make a difference to the egress and entrances of this? I don't know. I did not know you guys did a crane test. That was part of my comments I was going to send in before, because I thought Mr. Twist had a great idea of doing a crane test, and I was going to suggest you did one, but you evidently did one. I would have loved to have seen it. Not my problem, I guess, but are there any photos that you could share? I'd sure be interested in knowing what that looked like, especially from the waterfront. As Mr. Lawler said recently, this is on the waterfront. So any discussion that you're having about the greenery, which is not on the water, is basically irrelevant. It's across the street. It's mixed use, as you know. I was going to tell you that Mr. Lawler was the attorney on that, but he already confessed to that. And it originally in the mixed use area was supposed to have a culinary school from Cambridge that was going to come down and set up shop here on the first floor, which we all thought was a great idea, which is why we gave a few other concessions. But either or, as you heard Jim mention before, their highest point, and that's to the top of the elevator mechanics and the stairway, okay? So it's not occupied space and it's not anything else, is, I believe you said it was 61 feet. So that's a long way from where this project is, believe it or not, seems to be. And by the way, 2 duplexes were removed to allow for enough parking for that facility, because I actually knew some people who lived in them. So we lost 2 duplexes due to that. And as you heard, the new zoning remains 35 feet or 2.5 stories. I am going to be the second person to say that tonight. because it's very important that when you make decisions and principled ones, you know, it's absolutely irrelevant what's happening across the street because it's not in the Harbor District. And it's totally irrelevant what's going on Main Street or Pleasant Street or any other street. What's important is that the prominence is not about what this does to the prominence of the street and how to minimize that. It is, in fact, the prominence of the harbor. This is the Hyannis Harbor. It's tiny. It does a ton. It's a working waterfront. And there are tons of fishing boats and ferries on both sides of the harbor. It's not just steamship, this High Line. They have year-round at least 2 ferries running 6 to 7 trips a day in the off-season. This is not just a summer recreational area. This is a year-round working waterfront, okay? And yes, there's a lot of entertainment that happens on the waterfront from individual restaurants and bars and stuff like that. And Wayne has a great marina there, and he brings in these boats from all over the place, but there isn't an antenna or a wheelhouse of any boat that comes in that harbor because it's not deep enough draft to handle anything that's going to block or create balance to something that's 60-something feet on a hilltop on the waterfront. It's just not going to happen. You're going to be able to see this thing from the end of Great Island. I mean, that's just not right. This is Hyannis, you know, we're not New York or any place else. And as you heard, the new zoning remains 35 feet and 2.5 stories. So the prominence we're talking about now is about from the water. At the last hearing, and this is where your principal decision-making really comes in, Ms. LeBlanc, who I believe is on this call at this meeting tonight, she made a comment that really stuck with me, saying that the new owners of Anchor Inn, who are not local, as far as I know, are really looking at this project to see what they could do. Now, everybody's looking at this project to see how far you can be pushed and what your breaking point is and what you're going to give into. And, you know, it's your job to support the standards for this community. And the standards for the community say Harbor District, 2.5 stories, 35 feet. Density, 7 units per acre, not 28. There's a difference, okay? It's very important that you do this. I remember when the greenery was being discussed and people were talking about, well, if they build this, what's going to happen? And there was some discussion with Mr. Simpson across the street at Anchor Inn. Actually, some discussion from the greenery with Mr. Simpson about whether he was going to build up any higher. And he wasn't allowed to build up any higher than the 2.5 stories at the time. So they were sure that those units in the front were going to have a nice water view. So planning board's been down this road before, just wasn't this project. But this is the granddaddy of them all. So I just hope you just can digest this in little bites and just ask yourself if it's the right thing to do or not, is to go this way. I absolutely think, I will say that I don't think it's the purview of the planning board to waive whether or not this project can go before the Historic District Commission or not. I think the town council can do that, but I don't think that's the job of the planning board to say you don't have to go to historic. I don't think that's part of your purview. And I'd love somebody to weigh in on that from a legal perspective or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. Appreciate those comments. And Sarah?
Yep, next is Paul Grover. Paul, if you wanted to make some comments, now's your opportunity.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, I wanted to speak not only as a resident of the town, but as a real estate broker here. So I wanted to be clear to disclose that because as I am a real estate broker, there's possibility that my company would be involved in selling if these are built. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I have heard from over the years in terms of people who have waterfront homes in town or large homes in town that are looking to scale down to something smaller and yet stay in town, and have been aware of the lack of that type of housing. So, for example, there have been people who have bought in Falmouth at the Cape Codder, or in Harwich at the Belmont. So I think there's certainly a demand for residential development overlooking the harbor, as well as the demand and the desire, I think we all know, for pedestrian amenities in any price range. And when we talk about revitalizing downtown areas, it's been acknowledged that combining residential with commercial amenities or downtown amenities or harbor amenities helps for making a more vibrant community. So I really just wanted to point that out in terms of my experience living and working in the town. I previously owned a home not too far from here on Bay Shore Road, and it was not unusual when we were listing properties for sale that people were looking to scale down from single family ownership, but still find something, wanting to stay in the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that, that view. Thank you.
Okay, next is Marie LeBlanc, if you'd like to speak.
Yes, thank you. Again, our concern representing the Lewis Bay Condo Association still remains the parking. We do understand fundamentally what's likely to happen if these units are built and they have neighbors and a lot of folks who are needing parking to come in, do cleaning, to come and make deliveries. Let's just pop into the Lewis Bay Condo Association parking lot. Folks think because we have mixed use and there are businesses in the bottom floor that it's okay to park there. And it most definitely is not. So we see this as being an incredible burden for us to be able to have to manage this and to have to look at alternatives to the access from our parking lot onto School Street, whether it would require us to actually put up physically a gate that would be tagged or whatever. So some substantial costs for us, as opposed to having to constantly monitor and to have cars towed. Additionally, I think depending on the time of day and the day in the week that you would come by our parking lot, you would get a very different view about how many spots are really quote unquote used or needed. So when we forget about even in season, but even when we're off season, if all of the businesses in the bottom floor, if all of those doctors' offices are opened, if they're running tests, if they're doing all of their usual work, we do not have any spaces available to be able to park in. And so it becomes a very big burden for our business owners as well, that they're folks who are coming on an intermittent basis would be able to find parking in time and be able to make their appointments. So that's a huge concern for us, and it remains that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Very much appreciate that. Sarah, anybody else?
Yeah, I'm going to check in with Town Council Vice President Paula Schnepp, see if she had any comments.
No, I don't. I'm just listening tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilor Gordon Starr?
No comments tonight. Thank you.
Okay. And last is Councilor Paul Neary.
Thank you. Just viewing and listening. Thank you. I'm all set.
Okay. And we'll go back to Wayne Kirker.
Hi, Wayne Kirker from Hyannis Marina, but I'm also the abutter at the Dockside Marina. And you know, it wasn't that long ago we decided we discussed in town the possibility of development agreements, and we created those so they could, if you had a perfect project in a perfect location, that didn't quite meet the zoning requirements, we could make that project happen. We could allow it to happen. But that's not, but this isn't that. This isn't a perfect project. This project is much too much on a small piece of property, and it's going to leave those of us that live or work there in a bad way. I'll get to myself in a minute, but you know, we keep hearing about the Lewis Bay condominiums, and as I understand it, everybody that lives there gets 2 parking spaces each unit, and then they get 2 guest spaces. And I know I drive by it every day, and some days that a lot of days in the summer, parking lot's totally full. And so, you know, if Stuart was to do the same thing, I mean, that's 34. That's almost twice as many spots as he's offering, and they're easy spots up at Lewis Bay. It's not like when you go into his parking garage down below and you got to work around columns and all that sort of thing. That parking is just not going to work. And relative to the parking, you know, as soon as people start parking in that street, it'll be a never-ending situation. For one thing, I don't see how, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't see how a manager of a building can tell people they can't park in the street. That just isn't his, he just doesn't have that authority. And although Stuart promised he told your subcommittee he was gonna have a guy, a parking attendant there all the time, which tonight I heard is now a building manager and a parking attendant. He can't be out there making that not happen. And you guys have got to understand, and I don't think anybody is seeing this real picture from down below. When you're down below where all these plans end, down at where you enter the dockside and where you have all of the first responders end up, that's a dead end street. So you got 2 fireboats and you have a police boat. And even since the time when the chief, when Hyannis Fire wrote that letter saying he now has concerns, well, since then, there was one big situation there. They got a call on a drowning, and you had to see what that was like. They didn't even get the crews to go out in the boats. They just brought divers down, and you had police and you had fire and you had ambulance and all that. And there's no such thing as moving down there. They all had to move onto my property to do it, and they're welcome to. But on a busy day, like in the summer, once somebody goes down that street, it's a 3-point turn for a car to get out of there. Never mind a truck. You got steamship trucks that roll down there already by accident, and I'm going to work with the steamship to fix that. I've had my first discussion with them already. But you've got people walking down there all day long to enter the steamship authority. You know, the pedestrians that walk down, and when you get down there, you can't get back out often without backing up the whole hill. So now we're going to add all this. You're going to have people desperate to park at their parents' house or to clean the people's houses or to deliver stuff to their houses. That loading zone is only going to work until a couple people park in it or one person parks in it. Could you imagine down there? I'd like you guys to drive down there. Picture if the rubbish truck was pulling into my property to put its forks into the dumpster, and the back end was sticking out into the street while he was in the street. Once he grabbed the dumpster and pulled it out there, it would be a log jam you couldn't break up. As soon as somebody parked in back of him, you'd have to get that guy to park to back up the whole street, and then he's going to back up into South Street. This just isn't an easy situation like has been discussed. It's a dead end street. There's 3 responder boats down there, and regularly they're down there to for their drills and to really go to work. You've got to sit at that bottom of the street and picture fire trucks, ambulances, police trucks, and my customers all trying to be there at the same time. So I just feel as though this type of stuff is getting glossed over, and I hope the planning board is seeing right through this because you need to look right through it. We're going to be our future. The future of Hyannis Harbor is going to look like this. Once you create this once everybody is able to lean on this and say, look, you gave him 5 stories, what about me? And he didn't have to worry about parking, what about me? That argument can be used anywhere in the entire town. You can't use the argument that he needs it because of the cost of the project and the cost of the property. He doesn't have a nickel in the property because he sold me a little piece of it for more than he paid for the whole thing. And he's been renting it out ever since, the restaurant out ever since. And then you've got the 3 he calls it the legacy. I mean, the legacy is going to be, we've got a jammed up disaster. That's going to be the legacy. And we talk about the same thing, then it seems to get glossed over next time. Please take a good look at it, because we've got to decide if we want a Cape Cod harbor or we want a city harbor. Right now, we've got a Cape Cod harbor, and that's what we need to have. People shouldn't, when you come in on a boat and you're looking straight up 60 or 70 feet at a building, that might look nice on a picture. And from South Street, he ladders it. It doesn't look so bad, maybe. But it's not going to be great from the harbor. It's going to look like you're coming in to the first part of a city being grown there. And by the way, when he compares this to the greenery, there's 3 balconies in the greenery. It's 3 stories and medical in the basement. He wants 5 stories and parking in the basement. It's 2 full stories higher than the greenery. So please take a ride down there yourself and sit and ask yourself, when all these people show up, how do they get back out of there? And thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate that. Sarah, have we got to everybody?
I believe that is everybody.
And just in case we missed anyone, just one final check if there's anybody else here for public comment.
Hello.
Hi.
Good morning, afternoon, evening. Stu Bornstein. Could I get a minute or?
Sure. Go ahead.
I'm listening to all the comments. Some of them are very good points. But let's look around the harbor for a minute, if I may. Let's start with Wayne. He claims he paid $1.8 million and recorded as $1.8 million. He didn't pay a dime. He got the plan for nothing in a lawsuit, first of all. So when he sells it, you don't have to pay tax that much on it. So he can defraud the IRS of about $1 million. That's a fact. You can look at the court case. It's on record. He didn't pay a dime for that piece of property, and he's sitting there lying through his teeth. That's beside the point. The other thing is, let's talk about Wayne for a minute, since he likes to talk about me. He's got a boatyard with 300 slips, 2 restaurants close to 500 seats. There's got to be 50, 70 people working there. And he doesn't have parking for 170 cars in that whole boat. You can Google it and look at the air view. There isn't room for 170 cars in there. And he's got between the restaurants, the boats, he should have parking for 500 or 600 cars, but it works for him, and that's great. All right, so not everything is the world. And we make it sound like on School Street, we're going to have a train of ambulances and fire trucks down that road by the hour, a half hour. And I bet you don't see 3 or 4 a week in there, the best of the best. And the fire department, I heard that he was harassed to come down there by some people, which I won't mention the name. And I called him up. He said he found nothing wrong what we're doing. There was plenty of access to do what he had to do if he had a fire. He had no issues with it. And if we want to bring him back in again and question him, I'm all for it. You guys had him at a meeting. He was there. He saw the plans, and he didn't have any issue. So a lot of things that are being said aren't right. On the other hand, let's look at Ocean Street. It's half of Ocean Street's a parking lot. This is your Hyannis Harbor. I'm trying to upgrade the harbor. There's nothing great about our harbor. Yeah, it's there. We try to do the best we can, but everything that we're doing is underground. All the cars, we got 34 units with 70 parking spaces. And I submitted a plan showing, I believe, 8 parking lots within walking distance, paid parking, $25 in the summer, $10 in the winter, and they're all in walking distance. So there's plenty of parking. Not unusual if you need a parking space to park someplace else and go in. And I don't think anybody's going to have to stack up on the street. We're gonna do our own landscaping, our own snow removal with our maintenance guy. And with us moving all the cars off the street with the drop-offs, which was a lot of work and a lot of expense to engineer, we're not blocking anything on South Street. Yeah, one side will have a garbage truck at 6 o'clock in the morning, probably there for 5 minutes, picking up 4 to 8 barrels and dumping them and taking off. So, and it's not unusual. It's not bad. He's got a 2-lane, you still got a lane to pass. Everybody's making it look like we got a ball game going on there every afternoon. And considering you got no sign on there saying dead end or whatever at the end of it, you got trucks on tomorrow that go down there. I don't know about that, but that's what they claim. And that's for the boat. That's nothing that they had a sign at the beginning of the street, no boat loading or whatever that makes sense on there. You'd probably eliminate that problem too. And that's something the town should look after. I don't know why they don't have one on there, but it's, I can see when somebody comes in from out of state, get on the boat and he goes down the wrong street. It's possible, but you just can't hold us hostage over that. The other thing we have to think of, what I'm proposing on height is what's going to be the standard on the rest of Hyannis. One by one, this is what's going to get built. And you've heard Jim say he's already had inquiries. And one of the things you're going to basically find, and this is pretty important, you're going to end up with 1,500 housing units in the greater Hyannis area. And I would say half of those are going to be families. They're going to have a couple kids, which is great. And each kid costs $20,000 a year to educate. You're going to have 300 to 500 kids you're going to have to pay for. I'm going to have to pay for. I own a lot of property here. But this particular project will generate $1 million. But for $1 million, the town isn't going to have a lot of aggravation, considering that we're taking care of the sidewalks, we're taking care of the lighting, all our parking is off-site. And if we need another parking, somebody will walk a half a block and put their car in a parking lot and park there if it's necessary. But we do have 70 parking spaces for 34 units. And the town is proposing now on this new zoning, one car per apartment. We've more than met the requirement. And I got to tell you, we spent so much time trying to build a really gorgeous looking wow project for Hyannis Harbor. Yeah, we could build it. We could make it like everything else that they want to build around Hyannis now, these little boxes, 800-900 feet, and put people in them. And it's ugly. I wanted to build a signature project for Hyannis. I've been playing with this since 1997. And we have spent a lot of money on it. And this little project, we've done everything you've asked us for. We've given you the housing, we've got the sidewalks, we got them off land, and we built a real good looking project. Yeah, is it the perfect? No, it isn't perfect, but I think it's about as close to perfect as you can get. And again, it is a signature project. Previous meeting, when one of the people at the planning board said, not this group, why do you want to build this in the industrial part of Hyannis? That's public record. That was said. And that's the assumption. And we're trying to upgrade that whole piece of town. And believe me, we go there every day, taking the homeless out of the bushes underneath the units. There's a lot of problems in there. We're in the epicenter of what's going on in Hyannis. I'm still willing to make the investment. And like I said, it's not perfect, but you got to look at the pros and cons. This is a great project by Hyannis. It's going to uplift the whole harbor. It really is. Nobody has put that kind of money down there that I'm willing to put in there to make it better. And like I said, everybody got an argument on it and an oar in the water. But truthfully, I don't think you're going to get a better project in Hyannis than this particular project. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Stu. I appreciate that. Attorney Lawler, we're not going to do a back and forth.
I'm not going to do it.
Everybody.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, there was a comment made about my client. I would like to address it for 30 seconds. That's all.
Yeah, I'm giving everybody one chance to speak. I don't want to have a back and forth here.
That was
I don't want to have a back and forth. I'm sorry.
It was a public attack on my clients, on my client, and there was facts that were spoken that were incorrect. And I believe, Mr. Chairman, that I can just say for the record that Mr. Kirker had a contract with Mr. Bornstein to buy the property. And after Mr. Bornstein breached the contract, the court enforced it 9 years later. And the reason, and they found him also, I believe, to have committed an unfair and deceptive business practice. And that's why what he's referring to as no money is that the damages awarded to Mr. Kirker by the Superior Court. He slandered my client, and I just needed to clarify that for the record on behalf of my client. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anything further related to that transaction, I'd recommend both parties submit it in writing. I just don't want this to come up again and be a potential distraction.
Understood.
Would just like to see, is there anybody else new, any other new members of the public that has not had a chance to speak?
There's no other public comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Ojala does have his hand up. I know he's representing the applicant, so.
Sure, yeah. Mr. Ojala, go ahead. Sorry, you're muted.
And if there are questions of me, I'd be glad to answer them too. But I just wanted to hit on a few points that are important as you deliberate. One of the big things on there is density, and yes, it's a high density. But the only reason we're allowed to have that density is because Mr. Bornstein is putting all the parking underground. Normally, you have at grade parking, and then a building cuts your density, roughly, way down, because you're using up a tremendous amount of real estate with a parking field. And so it is smart planning to reduce the scope and go vertical. It certainly it's less impactful on the environment overall. But that's one of the key reasons that this kind of density does fit here, is because he's spending the money to hide those cars underground. Just point out on the historic, I was at that meeting. I represented the client. There was only one vote against it. It was other than that, they all voted for it. And I would say that it's a very, very similar building to what they approved, just a little bit shorter, as we know. That's all I would say about that. And perhaps the town council would find that it is not unprecedented to get a waiver from that commission. And we did get an affirmative vote, except for one vote. I was pleased to see Mr. Kirker did correct Lawler that it isn't a truck traffic down there. It's only if a truck makes a mistake that goes down there. But we certainly do appreciate Mr. Kirker takes a very good care of the end of that harbor and does allow the fire officials and police to turn on his property. And it's sincerely appreciated, because that's a very narrow right of way at the end, and he does the public a good service by having a little bit of room down there for everybody. And I would remind the board too that we're fully parked. I know Stuart said it a couple of times, but we meet fully code for guest and all the required parking demand is met right on the site here. And then the only other thing it's very easy for me. I'd volunteer. If you have a particular building, just let me know. I take the laser out, shoot the ground, and I can give you the height in about 2 minutes. The height of that Lewis Bay Court, I shot at 62 feet. It could be a couple inches rounding error there. So I think they're right on the money with what their approval was. Interestingly, they're 93.3 feet above, let's just call it mean sea level. And our ridge is about 89.9 feet. The average of the two, now that's a shorter roof, is just under 90 feet. So a few feet under that, although we would add to the top of our ridge, honestly. So it would be very, very close to the highest point of them would be our higher peaks of the roof as well. So very comparable. They're also on high ground. If you go down South Street, you can see it goes up a little bit more towards where they are. We're just about on the highest, but they've got us by a few feet there. And then I think that was basically it. We did have a good site plan review process. We're absolutely, with the construction protocol, is going to keep that access. It's a key public safety issue. And Mr. Bornstein is going to work very carefully to make sure that access is maintained both during construction and then afterwards with an on-site manager. And cameras are very easy now. We get tapes. We could put cameras and have things on record. so that if we get a repeat offender, we can appropriately deal with them. There'll be a condominium association with some teeth. And certainly if we go sideways with our permit, I'm sure it's a civil matter that could be enforced on some level. So be glad to answer any questions more specific if needed.
Mr.
Great.
Chairman, I
Appreciate
would like
that.
an opportunity.
Yes, Attorney Kenny.
Either Sarah or Jim got tired of seeing my face, and the host has blocked my video. There we go. Now they're starting my video. Now it says cannot fail to start the video camera. Please select another. I don't know what's going on.
I turned it off because you were having issues earlier, and I thought it might help so we could see your name instead of just a black screen. So
No, it won't let me in. It keeps it. Well, okay. Just to respond to the public comment, first to Ms. Powell, brings up an interesting problem. This project went before the Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Committee back in February of this year. We're coming up on February of 2023, and she's suggesting it be sent back. This is one reason why I don't like regulatory agreements to go to that committee at all. Frankly, Chapter 168 contemplates that regulatory agreements would be viewed more as like a 40B process where the planning board is the host board and other boards have a right to weigh in. We were asked to go formally to Hyannis Main Street Waterfront Historic District Committee, which we did. We got it approved. Now we go through the process, and a year later, she would like it sent back. So I think that's something the town needs to take a long, hard look at. I think it's better that the Main Street board, as a board, not Ms. Powell on her own, weigh in on projects as opposed to applicants having to go to them on a formal basis. Mr. Lawler, Mr. Kirka, and Ms. Penn all urged you to stick with the height guidelines that exist there. They pointed out that the height, the new zoning change does not change the height there. And then they also claim that there's a parking spot, but they ignore the fact that we meet the current parking, and the proposed zoning would reduce the amount of parking that is required down to one, as Mr. Bornstein said, space per unit. So on the one hand, they ask you to uphold the height. On the other hand, they ask you to ignore the parking because we surpass the parking requirements of the current zoning bylaw. As far as a working harbor is concerned, this project has no impact on that whatsoever. If there is a problem, if it's traffic or whatever, frankly, it's created by the success of Mr. Kirk's multiple enterprises down there. It's got nothing to do with us. You all had, or many of you had an opportunity when you did the crane test to walk down to the harbor. You had a chance to look around. Mr. Kirk has some massive buildings right down there on the harbor. You had an opportunity to see where these two buildings are proposed. They're not on the water's edge. Between one of the buildings is a steamship authority terminal. Between another is open space where Mr. Kirk has proposal to put a building in, and then a parking lot. So they make it sound like we're right down on the water and the greenery is a mile away. You all had an opportunity to take a look around to see the view and how these proposed buildings will fit in with the neighborhood. And I think that they fit in quite well. As far as the fire department and traffic, the problem is at the end of the road. Mr. Kirk was talking about if he's got a trash truck in there picking something up and backing out into the road, and he's got customers down there, et cetera. Yeah, there'll be a problem, but he seems to work that out. I don't think there's been a problem down there, and we can work it out too. We've improved the layout of the road. The narrowest point now is 22 feet. In some places, it's 24 feet. So a key here is there will be sidewalks. I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to get on there when the Steamship Authority boat is either coming in or going out, and seeing people unload, and they're walking up the middle of that street, dragging luggage, and there's many of them because there's a parking lot right up School Street. So there's a lot of people walking all over the road there. Now they will have nice sidewalks to walk on. The road will be paved. The access will be better than exists. As far as the comments from the fire department, we've helped address some of those. We moved one of the excuse me, refuse sheds around the corner onto South Street to help open up that the entranceway to School Street. As Mr. Bornstein said, with 18 wheelers going down to the steamship, using wrong access, signage certainly would help. No terminal, no steamship authority terminal access, some kind of sign at the end of the street. As he said, I'm surprised they haven't done that before. And Mr. Kirker said that he's working on solutions with them as well, and we're happy to coordinate with them. And Ms. LeBlanc talked about the Lewis Bay Condo Association and concerns about our people using their parking lot. That's something that can easily be worked out. They have a problem now with Steamship Authority people using it, from what I understand, and they have a towing process. Our people will understand that. We'll make sure that they know that they can't use that. It's a private lot. As Mr. Bornstein said, there are multiple lots all around that area where you can lease spaces on a daily basis. Excuse me. So, in summary, you've all had an opportunity to get on there and take a good look around, see how this project fits. And I think instead of listening to everybody else, if you haven't been down there, take a walk down to the end of the road and take a good look around and make a decision for yourself. We'll be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Excellent. Thank you, Attorney Kenny. Moving to board comment, just want to get questions, comments, concerns from the board. I know, Ray, you mentioned you had some. We'll start with you. Before we do, I just wanted to mention, well, first of all, I wanted to say, thank you to everybody who commented this evening. Certainly some, concerns we're continuing to hear from multiple people. I think the biggest issue and the biggest waiver, obviously, is the height of the project and the number of stories. So, with that, I certainly think that all board members should, be forthright and, state your thoughts on the height. And if you're not comfortable with the height, let's get that out there so that we can, continue to work through this and see if there's some sort of a middle ground. So with that, Ray, if you could lead us off with questions, comments, concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think a couple of the questions I had sort of been answered. One of the waivers that Mr. Kenny had not mentioned in his rundown was the unit density. And it's 28 versus the allowed 7 per acre. So that's correct, right, Mr. Kenny? That's what the waiver is asking for?
That's correct. And I didn't mention it today because we had previously discussed that. I only highlighted changes tonight.
Right. Got it. Thank you, Mr. Kenny. I also, just as a comment, it's great that what's being offered now in terms of affordable housing is 5 3-bedroom units. And I will reiterate that, at least for me, my concern is domiciles and not the number of bedrooms. So when I look, because a domicile equals a place for a family to stay. And so for me, the higher value is the number of domiciles, not the number of bedrooms, just as an observation. No need for discussion or response. Mr. Ojala, a question about sewerage. So these units are going to be connected to the municipal sewer system. Is that it? As I looked through the plans, I guess I didn't do a good job because I couldn't find any mention of how there would be if there's going to be a hookup, how that would be accomplished.
Sure, through the chair. Yes, Dan Ojala from Downcape Engineering. Yeah, it's fully engineered. You have to dig into the site utility sheet to see that, but there's a listing of both the sewage flow, which you figure 110 gallons per day per bedroom. There's an existing restaurant on the site, as well as there was a hotel on the west parcel, as well as going way back, a hotel on the east property. and all were connected to sewer. So there's a sewer main right in the middle of the road. The benchmark is right on the sewer cover. And there's all water separators, special coalescing plate separators from the floor drains in the lower levels that if there was, God forbid, a spill of oil or something, it would be captured before it gets into the sewer system. And then above that is just a standard gravity system for all the units to connect right into the local sewer system. And it's my understanding there is adequate capacity in the plant. We certainly haven't heard otherwise through all the engineering department comments. So it will not be polluting the harbor with nitrogen. It'll all be treated at the treatment plant. So those are detailed out on the site utility drawings.
Okay, and I assume then that ties into a main that's probably running down South Street or something?
You bet, yeah, and they just upgraded. There's about 100 horsepower pumps in that big sewer lift station on South Street that lifts it all the way up to the plant up by Jiffy Lube or up in off Bursa's Way, yeah.
Okay, one other question for you. In terms of stormwater management, we talked about that when I visited, but I want to make sure I share it with my colleagues, is that I told you that I lived for quite some time just outside Washington, D.C., which is the town of Cheverly sits on the first high ground, hills of sand and clay, somewhat similar to what we have here. And in the last housing development that was built in Cheverly, 3 houses slid off their foundations. And I was asking you, this is a big project. How do you pin those big facilities down so they don't slide down the hill? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, how does I believe that you call it the infiltration system interact with the underground parking? In other words, how do you handle the storm water and make sure that it doesn't down the road compromise the underground parking area?
Sure. With respect to the stability of the project, we are blessed here with a bunch of nice sand outwash plain. The geology of the Cape is basically that glaciers push down in a couple of different glaciations. But the furthest most extent was right in Cape Cod Bay. They formed a big terminal moraine in the mid-Cape, and you will get some tills and clays up there on the ridge and huge boulders, glacial erratics. But then as the glaciers eroded, we had huge outwash rivers that just layered sand and gravel. And we're sitting on some of the nicest sand and gravel deposits anywhere in the nation here in Hyannis. And we did dig down and verify the extremely pervious sand and gravels, the highest rate class that's allowable. And so the drainage systems that are designed currently are deep sump-footed catch basins. They have some oil water separation ability there, especially on a smaller spill. It'll sit on the top outside of a snorkel and evaporate into the air. Then secondarily, it goes into a second deep sump-footed basin with another snorkel, which you can get some more suspended solids removal. And only then is it allowed to go into infiltration pits, which are giant honeycomb, and then there's crushed stone around those, or washed stone and filter fabric, and they're sized appropriately per the subdivision rules and regulations and the state stormwater management guidelines. We double checked the infiltration rates out on the site with one of the town engineers, one of my engineers and I, and are very comfortable. It's a nice, safe drainage design. And of course, because it's principally roof runoff on the site, you wouldn't anticipate it be getting much sand and gravel and salt. So those systems should last many, many, many years. And then if and when they eventually do start to silt up and back up, they could certainly be removed, some more sand brought in and rebuilt in place, and in that manner effectively act in perpetuity. So that's the infiltration of that. And in terms of sliding down the hill, what you would do is you take a cross section through it. You look at the angular repose of sand. You're absolutely right. If you get a clay situation, it can be slippery, and you could have some interesting, almost a ball bearings underneath your footing where you could have some sliding. Here we've got nice, tight, granular sand and gravel with smaller particles, larger particles that lock in and perform a very sturdy base. couple tons per square foot all day long bearing capacity, and able to stand, shakes and quakes. There's no soils underneath that would liquefy or cause any settlement problems. So by the time you get down to the bottom of the footings underneath these buildings, you're looking at a very stable structural system. Of course, it'll be fully engineered, peer reviewed, and construction control by the design professional. They'll examine the footing bearing capacity and the design very carefully, and there would be generally a couple sets of eyes on that, as well as the building department. So you'll have a design professional, a geotech for that. And then the basements are very far above mean sea level. So there's no chance, even in the worst case scenario, of them flooding from seawater. Stormwater, of course, could potentially get in there. But again, we've got an extensive drainage system up above on the courtyards. It's all pitches all that water away. So you basically have a dry shell underneath there. And we've got a trench drain. So it's two parts. One, you form a little trough by the entrance drive. So you make sure that the little bit of runoff that's coming down the road in front of you doesn't channel down. And so that swales down to the drainage systems that we're building for the town on either side of the entrances. But then on the entrance itself, you'll see, just as you get down near where the doorway closes, there's a strip drain, and that will capture any water that's brought in down that slope. Just the apron should be just the apron runoff. It will capture that, and that goes into a subsurface drainage system that is the same. The inverts work that it's the same as the larger systems that take care of the roof runoff and the site area drains. So and then if there were a water leak, say a sprinkler head went or something, and you get some clear water that's running in there, then it would overflow into the oil water separator, where if there was even any grease or oil that's less than 10 parts per million gets through that, and then that would go into the sewer system. But again, that would be a very rare situation indeed, and should be shut off very soon after it started.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Ray, was there anything else?
Muted, Ray.
Oh,
No,
sorry.
Ray,
Yeah, so thanks, Dan. You kind of touched on what follow-up I had, which was the amount of impermeable surface will increase. So I was concerned about that being funneled, the runoff being funneled, down the street into the harbor. I think you just talked about that system of trenching. You have confidence that that's between the drains and the trenching that you'll mitigate that?
Yeah, right now, when we started this project in '97, there were no drains further down. The town, I think, heard us on one of the early presentations and did drop a set of basins in further towards School Street. So that's down there. But to the extent that from the crown of the hill down to the end of our project, we also put in a fresh set of basins there and a dedicated a deep sump manhole and deep infiltration pits to take care of that little bit of runoff that's coming from the crown down to the end of our property. So you're doubly safe. Yeah, every drop that comes down that road from our site will go right into a drainage system that's properly designed, and all around our building, the courtyards and area drains, will put it right into the ground. And again, it's a tremendous capacity of that nice sandy sand and gravel underneath us to absorb even to the extent of a 50-year storm falling on this. Everything would go into the ground, is what the HydroCAD analysis shows.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Mr. Chairman, I got a couple other things that I'd like to share. It's been said, and I think it's worth saying again, and giving credit to Bob Twist. We should keep foremost in our minds that we are setting a precedent here. And it's important to consider that. And in fairness to Mr. Bornstein, I think I echo what your guidance is that this should not be a death of 1,000 cuts, and we should not string this out. He's paying good money to a bunch of professionals, and we should give as clear an idea of what our expectations are for an outcome as possible without rushing. That said, I have a couple of questions for my colleagues to consider. They kind of do echo some of the concerns that were raised earlier, but worth saying again. First of all, when the existing zoning was enacted, why was 2.5 stories decided to be the limit? Why was that? The second one is in the proposed package of revised zoning currently in front of the town council, the other subzones did have building height limits changed, but not the harbor zone subzone. So why was that? Thirdly, if we approve a height waiver before the new zoning is considered by the council, what does that say about the relevance of the harbor subzone unit? In other words, kind of begs the question, why have zoning at all? So I think it's important that we take the specifics of this particular project, but also in a larger sense, some of the larger ramifications for our community. And I know we want to, there's been talk about making the site better, and that's great. I would just remind everyone that the planning board is not responsible for ensuring that the developer makes money on a project. That is to say, we don't want to not have developers not make money, because if they don't, they probably won't develop it. However, our responsibility is securing a greater good for the community, however that is defined. And Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we keep the questions and those thoughts, those responsibilities in mind as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ray. Appreciate that. And I'll go over to Bob next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My biggest concern is that which most people have voiced, that being the height of this building. It strikes me as extremely high. It's a very significant deviation from the zoning which is in existence. It's a deviation from the zoning that's proposed. It's a deviation from most of the buildings in the general vicinity, although not all of the buildings in the general vicinity. So as we go through, there's all these issues we're talking about, and they're all important issues. But at the end of the day, the one that I'm looking at mostly as a make or break issue for me is the height of the building. And I don't really know at this point in time how I'm going to come down on that particular issue, because I've been listening to everybody, and everybody's making good points and very persuasive points. And I find myself leaning one way, listening to one group of folks, and leaning the other way while talking to another group of folks, which suggests to me that these are all valid points. The point that Ray just makes, however, is also a very, very important point, and it's an overarching point. It's a bigger issue than this building, and I think we do need to give it some consideration, and that is exactly what Ray just outlined. For some reason, historically, the town decided that the appropriate height in this area was 35 feet and no more than 2.5 stories. We're going forward with proposed zoning, which is going to keep it at 2.5 stories and 35 feet. And I'm sure that there's a good reason why those numbers were settled on. And the question that I'll rephrase it a little differently than Ray did, but if we're going to, before we even implement, we meaning the town, not the planning board, if before the town even implements the new zoning with a 35-foot cap on it, if we're going to approve a building at 64 feet or 62 feet, what does that mean about the overall zoning for the Harbor District? Because I think we can anticipate as we go through that there may be other applications in the vicinity in this zone which will see more than 2.5 stories and more than 35 feet. So I think we do need to take a step back and look, and do we really want to zone in the Harbor District 2.5 stories and 35 feet? Or should we be zoning in the Harbor District something that may be even higher. But that only indirectly relates to this project and more directly relates to the pending zoning proposal. But if I keep taking a step back and looking at it, I keep coming back to the question of, well, if we're comfortable with 5 stories and 60 feet, why are we proposing to implement a new zone at 35 feet and 2.5 stories? I don't have the answer to that. I just want to throw it out there and more finely tune perhaps the issue that Ray just raised. Now, there is an issue I keep coming back to separate from that, however, as I listen to all the things that people are saying. If the proposal here was for 2 buildings, each of which were 2 stories, with a total of 16 or 17 units, with 2 parking places for each apartment, we wouldn't be having any discussion about height because it would be within the zoning allowance, and no one could make a credible argument as to why a person should not be allowed to go up to that height as a matter of right. But many of the issues that we've been talking about wouldn't change if we had 2 two-story buildings. The width of School Street isn't going to change. If a tractor trailer gets lost and goes down School Street, whether the buildings are 4 stories or 2 stories, it still creates a mess at the bottom of the street. If cars come down thinking they're going onto the ferry and they get to the bottom of the hill and they realize they're on the wrong street and they have to turn around and there's 3 cars behind them and Mr. Kirkus' parking lot is full and there's no room to turn around down there, it doesn't make any difference if the buildings are 4 stories or 2 stories. It's the exact same problem. If you have 2-story buildings with 16 or 17 units in there, DoorDash is going to come, UPS is going to come, FedEx is going to come, the cleaning people are going to come, the trash people are going to come, the trucks are going to be the same size, they're going to be turning around in the same place. Now, granted, if you have twice as many units, you're going to have twice as many people coming to clean. But the point is, if this road is going to be impacted so it's impassable and it can't function as a public street in the town of Hyannis, for these reasons with 4 stories, it also won't be able to function with 2 stories. And we've heard discussions of examples of historically how the fire trucks can't come down, they can't turn around, tractor trailers can't turn around. If we put no buildings on the street, many of those problems will still exist. It seems to me what we're really talking about is, can we build any apartment buildings in these two parcels here? Or is the only way it would work is if you build a building on one of the parcels and have open air parking on the other side. So all these people who get lost or go to the wrong place or have to turn around their trucks because it's trash, does it have to be an open air parking lot to give them room for that? And I'm certainly not suggesting that we do that. But I do want to suggest that a lot of these issues I've been hearing about really are not impacted by whether this building is 2 stories, 3 stories, or 4 stories. And I think that brings us back to the principal issues, the height of this building, and how is it going to fit in this neighborhood, and what impact is it going to have on the development of the east end of Hyannis for the next 30 years. And with that, I'll pass it back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate those comments. Mary.
Thank you, Steve. I think obviously Ray and Bob made great points. My bigger concern is always with the regulatory agreements. I'm in favor of regulatory agreements when it makes sense. I look at this specific area and I think that it could be, I would love to see it made into either residential or commercial, not necessarily hotel, but maybe additional restaurant area or mixed use. Maybe there's another way it can be developed that fits all of the needs of the neighborhood and doesn't require restrictions such as the fire trucks turning around and deliveries and parking. But my concern is this is the harbor is supposed to be one of the jewels of the area. And when we start changing or accepting regulatory agreements where, building heights or density or parking, whatever the issue is, accepting the variances, it's just going to set the stage for other developers to do the same thing. And eventually, my concern is that whole area will turn to specifically an area that we don't necessarily want to have representing Hyannis or the town of Barnstable. So I am not necessarily in favor of this particular regulatory agreement because of the number of variances, because of what it will do to opportunity for developers down the road and what we will be seeing in the next 30 years. So I'll turn it back over to you, Steve.
Okay, Mary, thank you. And Steve?
Thank you, Steve. Definitely a lot of really good points. I think in terms of why the Harbor District was left out of the discussion around zoning, in my opinion, it seems to me that they're trying to get something passed with the council that is very much razor thin in terms of likelihood of that being passed. So clearly anything remotely including something as controversial as the Harbor District would clearly just make that impassable entirely. So I think that's sort of my guess as to why that occurred. Now everyone's talking, I have a few points, but I'll kind of just piggyback on Mary's thought. And I think with what a lot of other folks have said in terms of setting a precedent. And, I've been part of this subcommittee early on, and that was sort of a good, in my opinion, joint effort of the planning board and the town council to sort of get to the root of what the issues are. And I think, clearly Bob pinpointed that, and we're all sort of ending up in the same place in terms of the height. So from a precedent standpoint, if you take the appearance of the harbor, and you have to think about it as individual parcels, think about where, if we're starting on the sort of the northeast westerly edge, we have Highline ferries. We have a beautiful public park where people walk with artist cottages for crafts and so on and so forth. We have a fantastic landmark restaurant in Spanky's. Adjacent to that is in my opinion, a little used but spectacular jewel of the town of Barnstable for open space and for outdoor venues and concerts and so on. Everything that could really take place there, seems to me it's fully underutilized. So as we move closer to the site in question, we're really talking about a handful of properties ultimately that may be candidates for potential, changes. We've got Baxter's right on the waterfront. Clearly, I don't see anyone attempting to build, 4 or 5 story apartment/condos in that space. And then adjacent to that is the Steamship Authority. And I think everybody who has familiarity with sort of how they operate, even though they clearly provide a lot of traffic, that may be the biggest thing that they provide to the town of Barnstable. Because I don't necessarily think that they're, from a tax-paying standpoint, providing any significant value in terms of revenue to the town. A lot of folks pass through there on their way to Nantucket specifically, but I don't know what other value they're providing. So then you think about, okay, now we're looking at the site in question and really the other sites that follow along South Street heading towards the hospital. So yes, definitely there are other sites along that corridor that potentially, may have a similar idea of wanting to create something. We on the planning board are always cognizant of housing. So that's one of our big goals, right, is to make sure that we have housing. Well, I know, I'll use Felicia because she has been in town and been engaged and been very vocal and has really spent a good part of her life really fighting for things that she believes in. And I think that's amazing. I sit with her now on the LCP committee, and her experience and her knowledge is just, providing, I think, all of us with a lot of insight and clarity. With that being said, I think if you had to flip a coin and say, do you want, the golf course next to the, hotel being developed, or would you rather have this developed? I guarantee you in a heartbeat should be okay with having this developed. Everything is a trade-off. We've never built, to my knowledge, high-end condominiums. We had Mr. Grover on, who clearly operates in one of the most wealthiest communities in the entire country, state specifically that his clients, if they do sell their homes in Osterville and they're trying to downsize, where do they go? I don't know where they would go, particularly if they wanted anything with a look at the water that looks like a condominium. I know there's a couple on East Bay and Osterville, maybe one or two of those units. If they peek out their front door, they can probably see East Bay. But beyond that, there really is nothing else. The thing with the parking, and I think Bob really nailed it. I know that whatever history exists between Mr. Kirker and Mr. Bornstein, that's not for us to ponder. But with that being said, I think the concessions that were made, and I heard those concerns, and I also agreed with them from our last meeting that yes, there is a problem. We know the day and era we live in where there are parking, there are delivery trucks, and it's an entirely different world in terms of the amount of services delivered to our homes. But with that being said, I think the parking Armageddon and just constant trash trucks and all of the scenarios, I do think whether they be, certainly at points in the summertime, there will be some jockeying, no question about it. But as Bob pointed out, I think very acutely and succinctly, whether it's a 2-story building or a 4-story building or a 5-story building, that same problem is going to exist. So as far as that goes, there's never going to be a perfect scenario. So in my opinion, it really comes down to kind of the same basic issue we're talking about. What is this going to do for the future? What do we want our community to be? I would love to see us do something more than just build apartment rental units, because to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any, and when we've seen a lot of projects, I'm not aware of any projects that are considered condominiums where permanent year-round residents have the ability to purchase. Everything that I've been involved with and everything that we have looked at, I believe from a board standpoint, have been rental units. Rental units. Granted, we need rental units, but to think that if we really are looking to the future, we need to diversify Hyannis particularly, because I think the problems that exist there, I don't believe will be going away, particularly as we add more and more housing, whether it be affordable or market rate. Those problems exist, and I think by adding a little higher end real estate, and I think by adding additional tax revenue, and I think by creating a different look on the harbor is going to enhance really the value of Hyannis. Now, I know that it's not perfect. I looked at, and I was a part of sort of earlier iterations that Mr. Bornstein has put together. They were horrible, absolutely horrible. I mean, it was some of these modernistic designs, and I guarantee you he didn't want to budge off of that because he already spent the money. But I will say, not that he's a saint, but in terms of the project that he's put forward now, from a design standpoint, I think it does kind of match a Cape Cod look. I think it does provide, an enhancement overall to the appearance. And we're not all going to agree on that, which I totally understand. But from my perspective, I think the regulatory agreement has its place, and whether it remains in the future is sort of what we're looking at and what we're dealing with now. So to make concessions on height and density is within our purview. And in terms of Ms. Powell's question, I have no idea if that's a legal question or not. I'm of the mind that I don't believe it's materially changed to a point that it requires an entirely fresh view. That's a legal question that other folks can answer. I can't answer that clearly. So with that said, I think digesting all the really relevant and strong comments from all the planning board members, as well as members of the public, is going to allow us to at least think this through. And we either are going to agree on something, or hopefully we can agree to disagree as professionals, as friends, and move forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Tim?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, a lot has been said tonight, and a lot of my kind of opinions and thoughts, and some of it has been reiterated, some of it has been rephrased, and some new thoughts kind of brought up that have garnished some further thinking on my front and some of the things that I've written down. I just wanted to kind of thank the applicant for, kind of getting to where we are now. I think this process has been great, starting with the subcommittee and kind of, starting out with some of those non-starters and finding some good middle ground just to start off on the kind of right foot, and then going down the process from there. For me, it really kind of came down to three things. There's three things I kind of highlighted in my thoughts going into this, and these are just kind of my thoughts I wanted to put out there for the other board members. I didn't want to get into the minutia, and I do have questions, some follow-up with the applicant, but I just wanted to put my opinions out there because I think this is going to come down to these same topics for all of us to kind of discuss and find some middle ground on. For me, the number one thing, the top of my list was density. And, I was actually going back and forth on whether density was the first and height was the second, or height was the first and density was the second. And it's funny what Bob had said about if there's a 4-story building or a 2-story building, is there the same, kind of impact to the streets and the traffic flow around there, the deliveries, the in and out. And that kind of has maybe rethink some of my thoughts and kind of rephrase how I look at it. But when I'm thinking about the density, I do look at the overall area of Hyannis Harbor, and to a lot of the points that Steve had brought up of, what do we have there? We have the steamship and the High Line and the ferries and a lot of tourist traffic and commuter traffic, even, back and forth to the islands. And that brings a lot of people to the area. We have great public spaces. We have the parks. We have the Asselton Park right there. We have the connector trail that goes up to Town Hall to Main Street. We have the artist shacks. There's a lot of great streetscape walkability. There's a lot of very interesting, unique kind of things going on around there. It's not just kind of like strictly residential or strictly industrial. It's a very mixed area of a lot going on. We have the marinas, we have the boats, we have the fishermen. We have their use and their necessity to reach the area and also enjoy some of the same benefits as what is in close proximity. We have these great restaurants. We have other housing in the area. There's a lot of kind of things going on in this one area. And off the bat, that is one thing that when we talk about density and trying to kind of intermingle our town and have smart growth, is we want to, be able to have housing developed in an area that has a lot of these things, and especially in, walkable distance. I think this is a great area that is primed for redevelopment to promote some new growth. And, the town needs new growth for housing of many diverse reasons, kind of a slice for everything. We need rental, we need workforce, we need high end, we need luxury, we need downsizing, we need condos. I mean, you name it, we just about need it. And the kind of condo downsizing market is something, to Steve's point, that there really hasn't been much developed in that area in at least in any recent memory. And at least in an area also like this that could use that redevelopment to kind of reinvigorate some of the area. The other thing we have going on in this area is the hospital. And that drives a lot of traffic. It drives a lot of obviously emergency access to the area. It also, has the impact of promoting doctors' offices nearby, kind of everything else. And that is an area in a campus that's going to continue to expand and continue to kind of want to, widen out for footprint. I mean, I know way back it was supposed to go over to the industrial park, which I think it should have done. That would have been great. And then something with Medicare and they couldn't do it. It was going to mess with the funding. But, so there's a lot of things going on in this area. Off the bat, it is an area that is, kind of ripe for some redevelopment and some growth and of some different types. Some particular issues with this project in this area is, just the overall density. I think it was 28 units an acre. I mean, that is not just kind of pushing the envelope of what we've done before and what else is in town. It's, going to a new extreme. It is definitely setting that kind of new precedent. There's been a lot of kind of talks about the parking and, it's just kind of worth to note with all those uses I mentioned before, a lot of those are summer uses, the steamship in the summers, the restaurants in the summers, the deliveries, the boat use, the emergency use, the amount of times the police boat and the fire boat party go out in the summer versus February is a lot more. So it's in these condos would also have a lot of summer use. I mean, you think about July 4th weekend, how many guests are going to want to come down to a condo to watch the fireworks show, and where are they all going to park? And it's at the same time that the steamship is, booked out for weeks on end, and, vehicle traffic up and down the roads. It's just, it does kind of lend itself to promote its most intense use would be during the same time as a lot of these other uses would have their most intense use periods. One thing that kind of got brought up was I think Dan Ojala mentioned the construction process, and this is a little bit from my background, but, we also need to consider, if we are worried about the impact on the streets, whether it's a 2-story building, a 4-story building, we need to think about its impact from its inception all the way to the long term. And, about this is where we'll have to go through the details and get into the weeds, is we don't want to have these roads greatly impacted during the middle of these peak use times. We don't want to have a concrete pump truck close it down for, 8 hours for one day for one pour, the July 4th weekend. The parking staff, I think it was mentioned that it'd be a full-time employee, but that's not something that is not someone are they going to be there that, Friday night at, 7, 8 o'clock, when the steamship's getting out or not? And, with the staffing and a lot of these management principles, would be set up for just kind of regular time, or would they be set up for peak time? So it's just kind of one thing overall in density, some of my thoughts kind of around it, density as a whole and in this area, and is this the type of area we want to promote development, but do we want to promote such a severe increase in density and some of those issues and some of those things to unpackage around it? Going down to height, the locus of the property is just naturally kind of higher than anything else around it. I think someone had said that, it's about the same, or it's maybe just a little lower than, was it Greensway down the road? But, after looking at the crane demonstration and then driving across the harbor and looking out from that point behind Highline and looking back at that basket, it's very clear that the top of that basket, which represented not even quite the ridge line, I think it was just a foot or two below the ridge line to kind of give an average of the height. It looked like you just took one story and plopped it on the top of the Greensville development, and it stuck out. It stuck out as kind of that new height in that area and a lot of bulk up high. And the one thing the crane demonstration didn't do was it was one corner of it. So you can see the relative height, but you didn't see 2 cranes for that one building and then 2 cranes over to kind of represent the width of the building. And that kind of adds up to the overall mass and the feel. If you have this one kind of tall square block right on the edge of that slope that goes down to the harbor, and it's very prevalent and it looks just kind of straight up. What are we talking? I think it was 64 feet to the parapet. And then that's just to the parapet. There could be an elevator shaft or something above it. I think there's the kind of cupola or bell-shaped roof on the end that actually goes a little bit higher. And look over at the other development and they might have that same height, but then they have the elevator shaft above it and some other elements that kind of bring it taller. But, when zoning was kind of first developed, especially in like New York City, it was really kind of aimed actually at like shadow lines and how much a building mass affects its surrounding area. I look at this, and although I appreciate, the applicant, I think right out of the subcommittee realized that height was an issue, and it was an issue, that it was probably going to be an issue for us, and it was probably going to be an issue for town council, and they brought the height down. But I actually think that some aesthetics were lost for that building, and it looks a little bit more out of place by losing some of that roof shape. I'd almost like to see if it lost a story, but still had its tall gambrels and kind of had a lot of those architectural features from before, because it looks more natural to our area. And also thinking about our new zoning and how, the 4-story buildings are allowed, but if they are set back for that 4th story, just kind of takes that massing of one big block of a building and helps it step back to, I think Jim had said, kind of add some human scale to the streetscape. It's not just kind of one tall city block. It looks a little bit more natural as it goes in, as it gets taller. So, there's a lot kind of with the height. I think we all seem to be kind of getting back to that's the one unknown, one thing that is, not quite solvable, or we're not quite, there's only so many questions you can ask about it and you still get to kind of the same point. My last point I just wanted to bring up was the kind of offsite housing and how we think about that. What is the benefit for the town? And it's great. We do need to promote housing development. We need more affordable units. We are in desperate need of that. But we think about this regulatory agreement and, what concessions we are giving to be able to get more housing units. And, one thing it's just kind of a different mindset on this as I look at this of, okay, there's 310 Barnstable Road and it's going to be developed into, I don't know how many total units. And they really kind of aimed at a workforce housing, market rate workforce rental housing. Well, if you take 5 of those units that are probably going to be built anyway, and you put deed restrictions on it, it's great. It adds to our affordable housing stock, but it doesn't necessarily develop more overall units, especially when we need both market rate and affordable units. So, is that trade-off really kind of worth it just to get 5 of put deed restrictions on 5 things that are probably going to happen anyway? It's not promoting, it's not developing a new actual unit to add to the overall cluster. So just kind of to wrap up, this is definitely a genie out of the bottle. This is definitely setting a precedent. I think Bob, Mary, and Steve kind of brought up a good point, and Ray, that, not only is it setting a precedent just to allow it, but it just happened to be that, we have this zoning going in front of the town council for the form-based code zoning. And, what kind of precedent does that set to the town council that, hey, here's this new zoning reform that we worked very hard on. And hey, here's the first thing is also a regulatory agreement that, almost doubles and kind of ignores a lot of the structural elements that got built into that zoning. So it's just kind of sets the wrong precedent. I'm not sure. I'm pro-development. We need projects like this. We need to find a way to work with density. We are definitely going to have to find a way to work with height if we're going to solve our housing shortage. I'm just not sure if this is asking too much in giving us too little. Is it solving all of the problems equally? It's not quite a bridge too far, but it might be a story or two too far. So that's kind of it. That's just my overall thoughts. Sorry if I went on a little too long, and I look forward to kind of working with everyone here to gather your thoughts and see what discussions we can have and where we can hopefully come to a consensus on this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate all that. And Michael?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So we heard a lot. This is obviously a big project. A lot of good concerns and great points made by my colleagues and also the public. Obviously, we're not going to get into a conclusion, a final decision tonight. For me, this is something that we really need to have our thoughts together in order to make a further decision. I don't want to be repetitive, so I just want to thank the applicant for some of the change that he has made since the day that we asked. I really don't have much to add at this point, besides just collect my thoughts and make a final decision. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. Just state one thing and then kind of make some summary comments. I do think we may want to consider having the fire chief come to our next meeting, only because I am personally confused about kind of where the fire department stands. I thought that the subcommittee had a real nice kind of summary statement from the fire chief at the subcommittee, but I'm just kind of unsure at this time. So I think if we get to that point, we should go for that. Obviously the biggest thing, from this board and from the public is, the height and the density. I also want to echo what my fellow board members have said about precedent. This absolutely, whatever we do here is going to set the stage for other projects. And I think we need to keep that in mind. I mean, ultimately, it's late and I just want to make some kind of final comments about where we can go from here and then hear if the board agrees with me. Personally, based on public comment and comments of this board, I can't see this going forward in its current state at 5 stories and, the current height that it's at, about 65 feet. So with that, I think, personally, I would still love to see this project happen. I do think that it is a good fit for that site. And I really would like to see that site developed. I think everybody would agree with that. And from the applicant standpoint, I don't know if there's other options for him. I don't think there are. So personally, I'd love to see some sort of a middle ground where we could find something that the public is a bit more amenable to, and this board may be able to get a consensus from this board. So, personally, I'd love to see if the board would be interested in having the applicant look at potentially lowering the number of stories and the overall height to potentially, 3.5 or 4 stories. There's pros and cons to that. I mean, the one con is, that likely would result in less affordables, but there's a lot of pros. Density would go down, the parking issues would be solved, and it would just be a less busier site. And then obviously the precedent and the visual of this site with that reduced height, I think would be a big positive. So board members, if you don't mind, without me calling on people, if you could just raise your hand and share if that's something that the board would be interested in seeing. A, is the applicant open to that, and B, what would that look like? Stu, go ahead.
Yeah, if I can get a minute, just to, I appreciate all the comments. They were good, and a lot of them made some. Can you hear me okay? Am I muted?
Yeah, no, we got you. You're perfect. Go ahead.
And a lot of good comments, and everybody had some good points. As it was said, whether it's 2-story, 4-story, or 5-story, the physical doesn't change. It's there. One of the problems to get this design is probably close to $3 million, 2.5, 3, maybe more. of what it costs to create that look above and beyond a normal building. And I understand that you think there's a lot of density, but I think with the price of land in Hyannis approaching almost $1 million an acre, you're going to have to come to the reality of it is the 2 and 3, 4 stories. It's tough to pay the cost of it. And a typical example, we take 310. If there's no affordable on that, just dollar to dollar in the rentals, we're like $240,000, $260,000 short on the mortgage, unless we put a lot of money in to reduce the mortgage. That's before the 5 units we're giving you, plus 3 more for the building. That's 8. I mean, the cost of what the rents are and the cost of construction are a big problem. If we cut off a floor of that building, it doesn't change the physical attraction. It cuts out basically like 27%, something like that, maybe off a little bit, of what we have to sell. Yet our cost for the infrastructure that we've given the town, the sidewalks, the road, the crosswalks, well over $1 million, maybe $1.5 million. The prices still are jumping around all over the place. Yet, and we're spending all that money to make that building look like it makes. If we lose that revenue off the top, it's a net loss for us. I'd probably make more money making a parking lot out of both sides of the street, which we could certainly use down there. Just parking cars. I mean, it has a glass ceiling of what we're going to get for these in Hyannis. Hyannis is not the stellar place you can get the kind of money you should be getting. We recognize that. And that's what we're contending with. And you, as part of the fabric of the town, got to appreciate the reason you don't see any expensive condos. Nobody wants to build them because they're tough to get the money for. We got a unique site and we're creating a neighborhood. The reason for 2 buildings is to create an environment that, yeah, it's a great place to live. We got a street. And that was the whole idea of the 2 buildings, because otherwise it's really a leap of faith to tell somebody, you know, come live in Hyannis and spend $1 million, $1.3 million, $2 million, well, not $2 million, but they just look at you and you got to be kidding. That's why nobody's building them. I believe in Hyannis. I love Hyannis. I put a lot of money in it. I am taking the leap of faith that I'm going to sell these. And I've shopped this around to all kinds of people. There are people that would like to live downtown, but they don't have any place to live. Right now, you have proposed 1,500 apartments. They're all going to be 800 feet, 1,000 feet. They're all going to be rentals. You're going to have a lot of families. But somebody here that wants to live downtown, live here 9 months a year, if not all year, shop, walk to those parks you built down there in the corner of Ocean Street, go to the restaurants, there's no place for them. And that's what's missing. Yeah, there's some trade-offs. You got some heavy density, but to pay for this project, you like the underground parking, you like all the freebies we're throwing in there, probably with those 3 bedrooms. We asked the housing authority, would you rather have 2s or 3s? They said 3s, we don't have any 3s. So we created 3s. It would have been the same cost to create more 2s, but we listened what the housing authority wants, because each 3 costs considerably a lot more money than 2s. So the trade-off is you want more 2s, we'll give you more 2s. It means you don't get 3s. I'll give you whatever you need. But we're trying to make it work in this trade-offs, no question. It's heavily density, but we put everything on the ground. We keep in mind the restaurant was there, had 200 to 400 cars a day pull in there. And that's during the day, and at night they're open all night too. So that our traffic is a fraction of what is there right now. That restaurant's 120, 130 seats. That could be off a little bit. And they did 3 turns at lunch. They did dinner. We're a fraction of what we're creating for traffic down there. Just think about it. We don't have 300, 400 cars. We got to have, you got 30, not everybody's going to go out every day either. Not everybody's going to use 2 cars every day. There's some trade-offs. But and again, as John Kenny pointed out, you got to go there when the boat comes in at 7 o'clock with the baby carriages and the luggage, being hauled up on the sand and the dirt in the middle of the street. I mean, we're trying to create a better look for Hyannis. And again, everybody that spoke has great points. I don't argue it. I'm trying to make it work, and I'm happy to some suggestions. If I cut the density, the project is underwater. If you come up with something else, I'm happy to do it. But again, I don't think I have a parking problem. I don't think I have a traffic. We're off the road. We're underground. This is no different than any other city that has these. Whether you go to Boston, Haverhill, Braintree, they all have these issues and they work. I think we're over elaborating that I'm going to sit and jam up the streets with people cleaning. And again, we got 3 places for drop off. We don't have a problem monitoring that. I mean, I don't see a lot of issues there with the signage. We'll tell you, yeah, once in a while you're going to have somebody there try to do it, but we'll be there on it. And again, I'm just trying to do a nice project for Hyannis. This was something I've been wanting to do for a while. It's a signature project. And I know everybody's got a very good thought about it, and I can't fault them for it. They're good thoughts. I just try to make it work as best we could. And we've had a lot of different meetings. I've listened to what you wanted, and I followed what you wanted as best as we could do it. And I think we did about 90% of it. As far as the height, unfortunately, you can't get this and get that without paying for it. Something's got to pick up the cost on it. That's the problem. Enough said. If you want to have another sub meeting and go over some of these things and see if we can iron out some stuff, I'm happy to do another sub meeting. As many people and see if we can get it done. If not, I can tell you, as much as I want to build this from the bottom of my heart, 4 stories just doesn't cut it. It wipes. It's all underwater. There isn't that. It's a thin margin bid to stay with. And if we're not going to get it, I guess we're not going to get it. Maybe I'll try for a parking lot. I don't know, but I won't come back again. That's it. I took 20 years to come back. And this little saw Joe probably cost over $2.5 million, $250,000 between lawyers and engineers. Just this one. We won't get into the other 2 that we did before. So I'm trying to do the best I can for the town. I'm a resident. I'm a major taxpayer here. I do nothing to hurt the town. This is all a plus for the town. Yeah, there's a lot of decisions. Are we setting a precedent? You're already changing the zoning to 60 feet across the street from here. I could build 60 feet if I buy the land down there. I mean, it's across the street or wherever. This is what's going to be with Hyannis. In fact, in 5 years, it'll be 5 and 6 stories. Land is getting too expensive. You got a lot of people in here, and there's got to be some trade-offs. And I know we go with the way we've been doing things for 50 years or 40 years, but everything changes. It's not the same. And I remember when I wanted to do 3 stories back in '97. They wanted to give me 2. I mean, it changes. And again, everybody here in that board was great. You guys were good. You had some great thinking about it. I just don't know how to make it work, guys. I just don't know how to absorb the cost of what I got to do for the town that you guys specify and not get the density that I need to make it happen. Yeah, if I can make some block buildings square and put them up inexpensively, we can do something. But then you can't ask me to go spend $1.5 million for the infrastructure for the town, and then spend another 5 times 350, another almost $1.8 million, $1.7 million for 5 3-bedrooms, which we're going to get back. It'll take 100 years before we break even with them. But that's part of the game. That's what we agreed to do. And again, everything's a trade-off. It isn't, and it's not perfect. If I can make it better, I would. And if you want to have another meeting on it, you want to bend out something, make it work, I'm happy to do it. I just can't do any more. I know any more I could do, but you got some smart people on that board. All right. You came up with some great thoughts. But again, keep in mind, whether I go 2 stories, 4 stories, or 5 stories, the infrastructure, the same thing happens. Nothing changes. So to sit and to talk about 4-story or 5-story, I don't think that's an issue. The density isn't an issue. Everything's underground. And these people are going to stay in town and shop and eat and walk around. This is what's going to stabilize the downtown, not more rentals with more families and more kids. I mean, it's going to help, but it isn't the end result. So if you, like I said, I am happy to flex anything I could. I just don't know how to get the cost out of this anymore because we keep, every time we sit in meeting, we add more to it. So again, I'll leave myself in your hands and you guys come with some suggestions. I'm happy to listen to it. I just don't know any more I could do. And by the way, your planning board's been very good too. They've been right on the ball. They've given us some guidance and some help. I think they should get a mention on that. But again, I am happy to sit down and meet with anybody, answer any questions anybody has, and show you more in detail what we're doing so you can understand the project. I mean, just if this got approved, it would take us 5 months and almost 15 people working just to plan this, from engineers to designers to interior finishes, soil tests, all kinds of engineering. This is a major building. This isn't a 2-story house. We would probably, before we get out of the ground, we'll probably spend $1.5 million in just engineering. It's the type of building it is. So it's not a small thing to do. It's a major commitment on my part and my staff, and I think the town would be very proud of this signature project. I mean, it really is. When I did the village marketplace, and originally they did it, the town was upset. We could just go, we got the permits to do it. And the second year it was on the front cover of the Chamber of Commerce catalog from Cape Cod. So I mean, we try to be a good citizen, and we don't try to do anything to ruffle feathers. I'm probably ruffling a few tonight, but I am happy to sit down with anything, anybody come with some suggestions to do it. If it doesn't work, I give it my best, and that's all I can do. And again, I want to thank you guys for a lot of time and you guys put into this. Believe me, I understand it.
Thank you, Stu. I appreciate your comments, appreciate your work on this. And no, it's a tough conversation. I mean, you know, I don't have a lot of experience and knowledge in construction. I'm very ignorant to that and to the costs. I know how expensive these things are. But I will say I am skeptical of, you know, taking off a floor and all of a sudden the project is not profitable. I don't know. I'm just, I'm skeptical of that fact.
Happy to share it with you. Happy to show you.
Well, we may get to that point where we need to see some of those numbers, but, you know, and, you know, Stu, you and I share something in common. We both would like to see this happen. I just need to face the reality of who's in this room right here. And, you know, if we were to vote on this as it stands right now, I don't think we have the votes. So I'd love to find some sort of a way to find a middle ground and negotiate it. And I just don't see it happening at 5 floors. And if you don't either, then unfortunately we may be at an impasse. Is there any other board comments that wants to respond to Mr. Bornstein, or may have adjusted your thinking based on his comments? Ray, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very briefly, I think it boils down to what is our, and when I say our, I mean the town of Barnstable and the village of Hyannis. What is the vision for Hyannis Harbor? And I think that's a central thing. And I'm without a doubt, I think Mr. Bornstein has really gone the extra mile, and I think that what's proposed aesthetically is really nice. But we have to think about exactly what it is, the character of the harbor, the character of our community, and it will change it by its scale, by its density, if you will. It does change the nature of the harbor environment. And perhaps that answers the question of why the height limit is what it is for the harbor district, as opposed to other subzones that are removed from the harbor. So I hear you, Mr. Bornstein, and I'd like to make this happen too. But I have to echo the chair that I think the height, just the scale of what's proposed right now is too much. And I think there's a way around the barn on that, and you're a clever guy. And I think We are all solutions-oriented people, and we would like to make it happen. It comes down to, so what is the vision of our community for the harbor district, not just now, but 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ray. I appreciate that. Any other board members that are, potentially open to this project? If you don't mind kind of cutting through the fog a little bit and just stating clearly, if you would support this at 5 stories and if you would support this at 4 stories. I'm just trying to get us to find a potential path forward, so we're not spinning our wheels. Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to note, going through the architecturals, I think the 5th story actually only includes 5 total units between the 2 buildings because it's only 5 stories on that section that faces the water. The rest of the bulk is like 3 stories. So you look at it, you look at 34 units minus 5, you're at 29 units. And if you take 5 units out, your cost goes down. Not substantial. I mean, it's not the most expensive units to build because it's really just kind of tacking on. You still have a roof system and all that. But, I just don't see how a whole project of development like this can hinder on 5 units. Because if you take them off and the cost goes down, not as much as some of the others, but the costs go down, then, I think there's still something there. So just my one thing I wanted to throw in there.
Can I answer?
I appreciate that, Tim. Yeah, Stu, just quickly, if you could.
Yeah, quickly. You're correct about the cost. The difference is the profits that come on the 5th floor, that the profits that come on the ones by the swimming pool are on the 1st floor. The 5th floor is going to subsidize some of the units that in the lower floors and in the back by the swimming pool. It was selling water views, and that's where the money is. If you ever check in a hotel and you want to go on the water, you're going to pay $50, $70 more for that room than the one that isn't on the water. We got the same situation. We got a cost is the same, but I'm only going to get so much money for the ones that don't see the water, that are on the side views or have no water views. And when we sell them, we could be losing a little money. They'll pick up some of the infrastructure costs, but that's where the money is. The money's made on the 5th floor, the 4th floor, the 3rd floor. That's where the markup is. Very, very simple. And if there was a way that I could eliminate the 1st floor and just put it on stilts and keep the floor, I'll be happy with that. That's what I'm dealing with.
Okay, thank you, Stu. Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not prepared to come to the point where we should abandon this project. In my view, this area has to be developed. Doing something, whatever we do, as we've talked about, sets the tone as to not only the rest of what happens in the Harbor District, but also what happens in what will be the downtown village district across the street and that whole part of the east end of Hyannis. Not doing anything also sets the tone for what's going to happen in the rest of the Harbor District and all the rest of what will become the downtown village zone if the new zoning is adopted. The land as it's been used for the last decade is not even remotely close to the highest and best use of that land. It's frankly dragging us down. It's 2 fairly ugly open air parking lots. And 2 ugly open air parking lots sets the tone for further ugliness as we develop. So in my view, we have to develop these parcels. And the only question is what's going to go on them. So I think it would be premature to say, we're going to have to step away from this. I think we need to take some time and regroup and give some thought to try to do the balancing test that everyone has been talking about tonight. And it may be that the cost to put these buildings in as their design simply is too high and we have no choice. And maybe when that balancing is done, people come to the decision that the benefits of having the buildings exceed the negatives of having the buildings. I don't think it would be appropriate to make that decision at 9:59 tonight. I think we should postpone that, think about it, try to regroup, and evaluate these things as a board. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Steve?
I do agree with Bob. I think, it's hard for us to sort of, which we are, we're basically kind of armchair quarterbacking this, but I fully agree that this has been crying out for redevelopment. So whatever is realistic, I think it's probably outside of, from a financial standpoint. I don't see us getting in the business of trying to navigate a financially viable product. But what I do see us getting in the business of doing is being very clear if in fact we're willing to kind of go back to the drawing board. And I don't doubt the amount of money that's been spent just from the architectural renderings and the site work and, Mr. Kenny's $1,500 an hour fee or whatever he's getting. Just kidding. But realistically, I think it's incumbent on us to be very specific because to Bob's point, it does set the precedent of we want to be viewed as a town that's open for business and willing to make, I think, realistic considerations for the benefit of the town, as well as for, the benefit of anyone who's willing to, put their hard-earned money into our town to make it a better place. So with that being said, I'm also in agreement to keep a discussion open and maybe just think about from our perspective, maybe we need to have a meeting on a separate topic. And we've never, ever talked about zoning in the Harbor District, right? So we clearly did it for the rest of Hyannis. That's kind of taking place now. So is that something that we should be doing, which may avoid problems in the future? And it seems to me the Harbor District in general, for the most part, is a fairly limited opportunity zone. So I don't think it should be that difficult for us to sort of understand the scope of what it is we're trying to achieve.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Any other board members want to make comment? Okay, I think at this point, we'd look for a motion to continue this item.
I will make a motion to continue this item to a future meeting. I don't know if we want to set something specific, Mr. Bornstein or Mr. Kenny.
Say the end of January, a meeting that gives us a month to poly around with it, the last meeting in January, if that works for everybody.
That would be January 23rd, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, January 23rd, 7 p.m.
Works for me.
Okay.
I move that we reconvene on this or move this item to a January 23rd, 2023.
Is there a chance we could have a meeting before that informally to go over the thoughts?
Well, I mean, certainly you can meet with town staff. Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to recommend that. I'm happy to meet with the applicant and his team, but for the board, you would continue to a date certain.
If I could just, one parting thought, that's great. I appreciate the continuance, but if this new zoning does go through, literally across the street, you're going to allow 4 stories as long as you set that 4-story back 8 feet. So just to think about, that's literally across the street, 35 feet away from here, 0 setback, I believe, 4 stories. So just something to consider.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. All right, we've got a motion on the table to continue.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate that. All those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Okay, the matter is continued. Mr. Bornstein, Mr. Kenny, Mr. Ojala, very much appreciate your time.
Thank you all very much. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Kate, do you want to do your LCP update next time, or do you want to just do a super quick one?
I can do a super quick update. Thank you, Chair. So since my last update, we've been busy actively engaging our community, both at meetings as well as at local events, really trying to obtain as much feedback as possible. And that feedback is basically the clay that'll form our community vision. To date, we have attended meetings at each of our civic associations. I will note that for a few of them, we are going to return where it was preferred to provide a presentation to describe what the LCP is first, and then proceed to attend one more time to engage in that robust dialogue about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges. Thus far, we have 600 responses to our survey, which is great, but certainly we would ask that you share the survey with friends and family. It's easily accessible on our webpage, barnstablelcp.com. It's available in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. There's also opportunity for general public comments on the main page of our website. And then if you clicked on our map and data viewer, we have what we're calling comment walls, asking 3 quick questions. Where would you take a visitor, your favorite road, and one thing you would add to Barnstable. So plenty of opportunity for our community to provide feedback, which we'll use to shape our vision. As far as meetings this week, tomorrow night there's a local comprehensive plan workshop in Osterville at the Osterville Museum at 7 p.m. And then on Wednesday, we are hosting a winter open house between 4 to 7 p.m. And that's at the Hyannis Youth Community Center. So again, open house residents, community members are welcome to stop by during this time period, the 4 to 7 p.m. There'll be interactive activities and games and such for our community to provide feedback on topics like housing, open space, transportation, jobs, energy, water, and more. And also an opportunity to talk with staff as well as members of the committee about any questions or ideas. I think that's it really quickly. Appreciate your time, but certainly if anyone has any questions or comments, staff is always available. And if you have any ideas for helping to spread the word about the survey and this plan in general, we certainly welcome that. Thank you.
Love it. Well done. Well said. I know you and Jim and the team have been killing it getting out there. You've been very busy. So it's great. Keep up the good work. Some correspondence, notice from DPW 180 Ocean Street, Hyannis Inner Harbor, maintenance dredging, notice from Energy Facilities Sitting Board and Department of Public Utilities, Eversource Energy Electric Transmission Line, Chapter 91 notice, 52 and 72 North Bay Road, Osterville, a pier, ramp, and float. Matters not reasonably anticipated by the chair. I have one. The night is so young. I figure I'll just get into it here. No, I'll make it quick. I do want to talk about our meeting format. It has come up from the public multiple times asking why we're not in person. We do, take all of those requests seriously. I will say for all the comments we've had about, being in person, we also do receive positive comments about Zoom. So I just want to go around and ask the board what we think about our format. I will note that, Jim, am I correct in stating that hybrid is not available right now to the planning board?
Right, at this time, that is correct. Hybrid is only available for town council at the moment.
Do you and Kate happen to know off the top of your heads how many boards meet in person at this time? Are there boards that meet in person at this time?
There are certainly boards that meet in person. I don't know off the top of my head how many. The Hyannis Historic meets in person. School committee zoning board is bouncing back and forth between a remote and in person from time to time. So it does vary throughout the town.
Got it. I prefer, democracy over dictatorship. So let's go around and just ask everyone what they prefer, and whatever the majority is, I say that's what we go with. So, Bob, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm strongly in favor of meeting in person. My preference would be some form of hybrid, and maybe we can talk as we go, not tonight, but as we go forward as to why it's only available for the town council, whether it's a technological issue or something else. and whatever the reason of why it is, how we're going to fix that, because I think that is actually the best. Having said that, that doesn't mean we can't have some of our meetings in person and some of them by Zoom. We can, some of the meetings, we know we have things where it will benefit from public discussion in person. And with these other things, we know that it's going to be perfectly fine by Zoom. So I think my preference would be, the default would be to meet in person, with the idea, if we know that there are things that aren't going to require that and Zoom would be adequate, maybe to go that way, assuming we can get the notice requirements out in time. If you make me pick one, it's in person.
Good comments. I appreciate that, Bob. And, certainly we can have this discussion every meeting and decide what we want to do for the next meeting. The challenge will be the balance between noticing and the agenda. We really don't know what's going to be on an agenda, and we have to give ample notice. But, if you look at January, you could say possibly the 9th would be Zoom and the 23rd would be in person, knowing that the 23rd will have shoestring, which is a relatively big one. So, all right, Mary, your thoughts?
I would, I do enjoy having the meetings in person, but I know I'm able to make more of them when they're virtual. So my attendance is just with my travel. That's just the way it is. But I like the idea of maybe saying we have a certain amount in person and then the rest are virtual. And if there's a project such as shoestring that maybe would benefit from being in person, they would schedule it on that in-person meeting for planning board.
Yeah.
I don't know if they have that ability. It's not always, they don't always have the luxury of time for something like that, but you can see where there would be certain projects or certain projects or certain issues that would benefit from being in person. And if we said, we did 4 meetings a year in person, people could schedule it around those particular meetings if we booked those in advance, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I do think, just lastly and quickly, because I know it's late, we do get a lot more. I feel like, just in my history, I feel like we get more people on the Zoom call than we do in person. Oftentimes we've been doing this in person and no one's been in the audience, right? Or maybe one person was in the audience or 2 people were in the audience. And sometimes they didn't even speak. I do feel like we get more interaction from the general public for these through Zoom, maybe because it's easier for them to dial in as opposed to getting in the car and driving to town hall. But that's just my overall feeling. So maybe a good combination would be is if we booked 4 or 5 out of the year that we're going to be in person and work around that schedule.
Yeah, no, and I do second that. I agree. We get better engagement on Zoom. Thank you, Mary. Good comments. Steve, what are your thoughts?
I definitely like the in-person for the bigger items, the bigger ticket items. So I would be in favor with that. But with that said, I wouldn't do them February, March, or April because I'm trying to go away. Available.
Yeah.
So Zoom is more advantageous, but
sure.
I would vote for May, June, July, August, September, October. But I would just seriously though, I would do. I mean, I like the hybrid approach, and I do think having ample time for big ticket items that we could put on an agenda and notice, I think that would be preferable.
Okay, well said. Tim, your thoughts?
Thank you. It's funny. I mean, for work, I'm going to Zoom meetings all the time, for other towns and stuff, conservation boards, health boards, historic boards, that kind of thing. In the past year, most of them have gone to hybrid, and usually I'm not petitioning something. I'm not an applicant. I'm just kind of one of the consultants who has to get up and talk about some plans or something. So the hybrid is great because people like me, I can come in and an engineer, an architect or something, we can add context and then kind of go out. So it makes it a lot easier for kind of the project team to get to it. And then being on the board, I definitely lose something, not being in person, on the Zoom, you can't quite interject and have a conversation. I kind of stay by the side, make a lot of notes and, drag on for a bit. So I'm kind of with, Bob and Mary and Steve, that, I almost kind of like default to in person. And then, I know it's tough to see what is and to know what's coming up on the, for applications and everything. But if you like default to in person, especially for the bigger ones, for the regulatory agreements and the like. And stuff like the A&Rs and everything, the ones we know could be simple or very easy Zoom calls. And I'd just like to note that, I think the town of Barnstable is one of the few towns, at least on Cape, that's still really kind of rooted in everything being Zoom calls. Most of the other towns have done the hybrid thing for a little while now. And I think that's great because you can get the in-person and it allows at least kind of the consultants and public comment. It's very easy for the public commenters to be able to log on to the Zoom and give that great input, which is one thing I think has been a plus because of Zoom, so I think the hybrid as a long-term end model is a great thing for all these boards. So I hope the town could figure it out. And in the meantime, I'd say definitely for the big stuff and for the regulatory agreements, I think it'd be good to kind of default to in-person and do the rest on a Zoom, especially in, January and February. It would be nice to be doing it from a beach in Florida too, so.
Well said, Tim. Thank you. I appreciate that. Ray, what do you think?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that if we, for example, I think if we had an in-person meeting on the 23rd of January, we'd be coming real close to being able to establish a quorum, I think, because like Steve, the January, February, and March, I already have plane tickets to a variety of warmer places. And so I would say as everybody else said, I think it's important to be able to look somebody in the eye in person when you're talking about something really important. On the other hand, I wish that we could ultimately end up with the hybrid version, but we should take in mind that I think for at least those 3 months, I think we should probably stick to Zoom, or if not, I think we're going to have some issues about attendance.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Michael, what do you think?
I agree with Ray. I mean, I like the in-person, but also to have this second option of doing via Zoom, it's also great. As Mary was saying, like we were able to get more people into these meetings. But it's good to also consider having an in-person meeting every now and then, not necessarily like every meeting, but
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I like it. All right, let's do this. Is there anybody opposed to doing Zoom for January 9th and in person for January 23rd? Anybody opposed to that?
I will not be here for the 23rd, whether it's Zoom or in person. I don't know if that affects the vote or anything. You should still have a quorum, I would think. I just won't be here. Oh, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to check with Karen. Our agenda for the January 9th, I don't believe we've noticed anything yet, right, for that one?
No.
Okay, so we still have the flexibility of going either or, whatever the board decides.
Correct, yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I won't be there on the 23rd, but I can certainly join via my laptop.
Okay. So with that being known, if we went in person, we would be without 2 members, which I think should make us lean towards Zoom for the 23rd.
You should ask Steve. I bet you he might be leaning towards the exit as well.
Well, I'm gone in February, so I'm working my butt off right straight through January.
There you go. But look, let's call the 23rd Zoom then, so we can maximize board participation.
Yeah.
What about the 9th? Could we get together on the 9th? Maybe take another picture? What do you think?
Not if it's, honestly, if it's like an A&R or something.
Yeah, if there's nothing really important, then
Yeah. Jim, how do we navigate that?
Yep. So, so the 9th, we will have a subdivision. Shouldn't say just, but it's a 2-lot subdivision off of Old Stage. You guys saw the preliminary subdivision already. There probably will be an A&R or something that comes in the door as usual. I believe we were planning on having DPW come in and provide a sewer update. It doesn't have to be on the 9th, though. I'm sure he was supposed to be here tonight, but unfortunately, I think he's actually at the Pats game in Arizona right now, so he couldn't make it. So, so he wouldn't zoom in for some reason. I don't know, but so yeah, so it's entirely up to you guys. We do need to notice at least that subdivision probably this week. So we do need some decision on that meeting date this evening, hopefully.
Well, let me put it this way: if January 23rd is going to be Zoom, and then February, March, we have a lot of people out of state. Let's get together in person on January 9th, regardless of the agenda, only because it will be a while before we can get in person again. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. In person on the 9th, Zoom on the 23rd, and then we'll just bring this up every couple meetings and keep lobbying where we can to get hybrid for our board. So, okay, great. Let me roll it along here. 2 minutes to approve. If I could have a motion to approve the October 24th, 2022.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the October 24th, 2022 minutes.
Thank you, Mary. In a second.
Tim, I'll second.
Thank you very much, Tim. All those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. And a motion for the November 14th, 2022 draft minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of November 14th, 2022.
I'll second.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary. And a second, was that Michael?
Yep.
Thank you, Michael. All those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
Tim?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. Upcoming meetings, as we know, the 9th and 23rd at 7 p.m. And we would, before we adjourn, anything else? Just don't want to miss anyone.
Happy
All right.
holidays. Happy holidays.
Yes. Happy holidays, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you, Mary.
Happy holidays. Hope Santa's
look
good
for-
to you all.
Thank you,
Let's
Ray.
hope
Same to
so.
you. Yes. And a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you,
And I'll
Mary. In a second. I think that was Tim, right? Tim with the second. Appreciate that, Tim. All those in favor, Bob?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Steve? Did I get you, Steve? There he is. Sorry. Tim?
Aye.
Ray?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
And myself, Steve Robichaud, votes aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Nice
Going
job.
to bed.
Happy holidays, everybody.